Good evening, everyone.
We need Dan on that one.
Good evening, everyone. This is the August 28th Board of Selectmen's meeting for the town of Yarmouth. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a couple of words. Eric Tolley will not be with us tonight. He had a death in the family, unfortunately. So I want to mention we have a lot of people here this evening, and I want to encourage people, first of all, to be civil. That's one rule that we want to be very careful with. And secondly, you should be able to make any comments you want to make within a 3-minute time period, and we ask you to be considerate of everyone else in that respect. So with that, I'll open the meeting to public comments. Yes, good evening. Identify yourself, please. And
my name is David Bernstein. I live at 2 Wisteria Road, West Yarmouth, full-time resident. House has been the family since 1950, so I've been there for a long time. I'm here tonight, obviously, to talk about Vineyard Wind, and I have a number of items I'm going to hand to you when I'm done. One is petitions that were signed by over 2,000 people that we collected in a short amount of time. I'll read you the petition towards the end of my little talk. In 2009, and then updated in 2015, the state completed an ocean management plan. And much of the plan is relevant to the placing of the cables in the area. So I'm going to present you part of that when I'm done, some of the highlights. I photocopied or I printed up some what I think are the relevant areas. One of the pieces I'm going to show you is a map, Appendix 5.4, which shows areas to avoid for cables. And one of those areas is specifically Lewis Bay. Again, this is a state report, updated in 2015. It also shows areas of concern for cable corridors, and it gives you a map of the 5 or 6 areas they believe the cable should go to, none of which are east of Mashpee. When asked about this at a public hearing, VW said that the map was made with Cape Wind in mind. Now, I read the report, all 100 and 200 and some odd pages, some of it legitimately over my head, but most of it I'm pretty good at understanding, and there's not very much in there about Cape Wind. It is not a report about Cape Wind. It is a report about where cables and other things should go at coastal management. I'm also closing specific highlights, the cables that were revised in 2015. I just want to mention a few. They said the 3 most advantageous substations are Braden Point, the Canal Substation, and Sandwich and Warwick, Rhode Island. Does mention the other 2, one in Barnstable, but that is less advantageous, according to this report. I'll quote something, projects will have to ensure that transmission cables are adequately buried to avoid or minimize impacts on water-dependent uses. I'm going to get to a minute about how much money is spent on recreation in the area, or in the ocean. It also says that horizontal drilling operations are typically employed as a best practice in order to avoid environmental resources, including shellfish areas and beaches. Now, VW says HDD is more expensive and they will use tri-plowing instead. And finally, again, areas to avoid were chosen based upon a number of issues, including physical, environmental impact, adverse interactions with existing use, and this issues still remain. In the section labeled Update from Coastal Management, which I'll give you.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up.
Okay,
okay.
One more minute. Tourism recreation comprises 73.3% of the area. So I'm going to give you this petition. We gathered 2,039 signatures. The signatures were gathered by local residents and homeowners. Signatures were gathered at public beaches by people who stay overnight here, by people who rent. And in the packet I'm going to give you, it talks about over $2 billion or $20 billion, I'll have to look again, dollars geared towards recreational uses.
Okay, thank you.
Don't worry about it. I have clutter everywhere. Hello, Paul Cove, 33 Massachusetts Avenue, West Yarmouth. This is Veronica, showing the posters here. Everybody has a packet which shows all the pictures here. This is one of the problems that we're worried about with the wind farm. This is just one of them, but I wanted to highlight this. Block Island has had 2 cables in the last 3.5 weeks, come unburied at the public beach across from Great Salt Pond. And they're having problems with what they're going to do with them. They said they were buried to the right depth. They're not buried to the right depth. There are some pictures on here that show you a couple things. They show you one of the 25 feet from Town Beach, the line that shows the water, the cable sitting in the water, the yellow one, and it runs through all the different scenarios. And one of the last pictures you'll see is what they did to the dunes. You'll see the big cutout in there when they renourished the beach and covered the cable. Now they figure the cable's going to last there underneath for about 4 to 6 weeks before they have to do something else. Now they're planning on putting a plastic shield over the top of it. We really don't want to have the problems like this in Lewis Bay with the cable floating in the water, no anchor zones, and all of the scenarios that go along with it. I'm going to keep my mission here a little bit short so that everybody else has a chance to talk. The most important thing we see here is that there are problems with the cables shifting, the sand shifting, and the cables moving. What we want to do is we want to prevent this happening in the bay in a shallow estuary like we have, because they do have an alternative site to run to. I don't think it's worth the dollars that the town's going to get for it to ruin our national seashore area here in the bay. So thank you very much. If anybody has questions, they can always reach me by phone or email on any of these matters or anything else. Thank you.
Thank you.
All set?
Mike Dunbar, owner-operator of Dunbar Aquafarm. I have one of the leases out in Lewis Bay. I'm out there approximately 250 times a year. So after seeing last year's storms, in the silt was just ridiculous. So if these people come in here and plow through it, it's going to destroy Lewis Bay. It's going to ruin the shell fishing there. It's going to ruin our leases. It's I don't know what else to say. It's just going to destroy the bay. I mean, I've just watched from when we had storm after storm after storm, and I was going out in February and March, and you couldn't even see the bottom. So I don't see how, if they do 2 gigantic trenches through the middle of the bay, right through the middle of the Scallop grounds, that's going to in any way be able to help anything. I mean, this is strictly for them to save money. It has nothing to do with us. And then they're going to rip up our roads and, make it so we can't drive on our roads for a year or however long it's going to take if they want to finally connect it. There's no reason to go there. I mean, it's a small bay that doesn't have the flow that the other one, the other site has out in the ocean, and the silt just stays in there and moves around for weeks. So it really should not be done here. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Judy Warren, and my husband Arthur and I have been seasonal residents here in West Yarmouth for 25 summers. Our children consider West Yarmouth home. And, okay. Yeah, that's my husband.
Probably find the background for you.
Yeah. Okay. I was one of the people who gathered signatures for the petition that you received tonight. I gathered signatures at Englewood Beach and at the small beach near our home. I learned a lot. All the residents who gathered petitions by asking strangers to listen and to sign learned a lot. Our beaches are populated mostly by tourists, by families who come here for 1 week, year after year. I have seen this in our small beach near our home for all these many summers. They are working-class parents with children. They rent small cottages. They dine at the family restaurants on Route 28. They enjoy the family amusements. They stand in line for ice cream. They have no voice in this process. This petition brings to light the concern which our tourists have for the health and welfare of Lewis Bay. So many expressed their shock and dismay at the thought of high-voltage industrial cables buried just feet beneath the soft sand. Especially troubled were the parents of children who participate in the Town of Yarmouth sailing program. Again, many come year after year for 1 week or 2. They rent cottages here in West Yarmouth, not Harwich and not Dennis, because of the sailing program here. These are young children and teenagers learning to sail, and we all know a big part of small boat sailing is falling into the water. You know, parents have 1,000 things to worry about while raising children, and now these parents have 1,001. We all just saw the photos which Mr. Cove presented this evening. Exposed underwater cables, large machinery on the beach in the middle of the summer to make hurried repairs. And we have seen photos of the no anchoring signs and the no swimming signs.
Can I ask you, please, to wrap it up?
Yes, sir. My last sentence.
All right, thank you.
So I would ask you, the members of the board, I would say to you, we all love our tourists, and we want them to return to a beautiful, blue and safe Lewis Bay each year. Will they return to welcome signs or warning signs? Please do not industrialize Lewis Bay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the Board of Selectmen. For the record, my name is Marty Riley. I live at 24 Hedgerow in West Yarmouth on Lewis Bay. And I just want to join with all of our neighbors here and the 2,000 people who signed the petition in opposition to the location of those electric cables being disruptively trenched into the very fragile yet thriving ecosystem of Lewis Bay. Those people, as mentioned by Judy, came from not only Yarmouth, but all 15 towns in the Cape, all of Massachusetts, New England, the nation, and internationally. So the concern that exists relative to this project goes far beyond the town of Yarmouth, and it is, in fact, statewide, national, and international. I also want to point out that we now have had access at the highest levels with our governor, our lieutenant governor, Secretary Beaton, and others as we take our case to the highest levels of the State House. And this issue is definitely on their radar screen. We've shared with them background briefing materials on this matter, some of them showing the exposed cables in very shallow waters in Block Island. Others taking excerpts from the Vineyard Wind newsletter, which has a depiction of them on Covell's Beach taking pictures saying, we've done core samplings and it shows that it's conducive to having the cables come from Covell's Beach. Also have had high-level discussions with some of the officials from the town of Barnstable who've said the following. 1, we're open to the discussion about cables going from Covell's Beach. 2, we told them that it can, in fact, work. 3, that we're willing to meet with the governor, Secretary Beaton, and others to talk about it. Lastly, I want to say there's only 5 cables on the Cape that go from the mainland to the islands of Nantucket to the Vineyard. All of them go directly from Nantucket Sound right to Nantucket and the Vineyard. That doesn't go through a fragile estuary like Lewis Bay, where you have 932 shell fishing licenses. You've got over 4 million plus oysters planted out there. You've got 300 moorings out there. In addition to that, you've got people doing jet skiing and other types of activities. You've got the community sailing program in Yarmouth. You've got the Hyannis sailing program. You've got beachgoers, and that's the last place that should go. So if we look at the precedent of those other 5 cables, one goes from Calmus Beach to Nantucket, one goes from Harwich to Nantucket, and the other 3 go from Falmouth to the Vineyard. They should definitely go into Nantucket Sound, so we would respectfully ask that all of these people are doing everything we can to help you as our selectmen to protect our interests for the town and preserve this bay for posterity for the benefit, use, and enjoyment of present and future generations forever. So thanks for the time, and we look forward to working with you to make the case to shift this responsibly to Covell's Beach or Brighton Point, or not to ruin Lewis Bay. So thank you very much, and we want to work with you to protect our town going forward for all of the related reasons stated here tonight by all the people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. As you know, we've already had one public hearing with Vineyard Wind, and I'm not sure how many of you folks have attended that hearing. Would you raise your hands just in case you did? Okay, all right, thanks, I appreciate that. And we plan to have more, and some of the information that you presented this evening is information that we haven't heard before, and that certainly should be information that is presented directly to Vineyard Wind and have responses from them directly. So we will have future meetings. We're committed to that, and we're still listening. So we'll go from there. So thank you. Okay. All right, Vita?
Vita Morris. In addition to what I said last week on this subject, I want you to keep in mind what is going on White's Path by National Grid. That street is constantly dug up by them. It's a utility, so look for something similar to happen on Higgins-Crowell's Street if these cables get buried there. And there's nothing you can do about that as far as I know. They can come in and dig up the streets whenever they feel like it, and if they feel that it's necessary. So keep that's an additional thing to keep in mind. Now on a totally different subject, I don't know if any of you remember how many years ago I asked that you look into the deregionalization of the school district. And at that point, the board called in Cleon Turner, who came in here and apprised us that, oh, forget it, it's DOA on Beacon Hill, forget such a thing, and it's a waste of time and whatever. And the board, I guess, took his advice, because nothing happened since then. Now, once you finally started talking seriously about it, I guess the school committee heard you, from what I understand from the newspaper. The school liaison hasn't shown his face here since last spring to apprise you, or me, of what's going on. And I hope that you will not just drop that subject matter. I think we need to continue looking into it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
For the
Vita.
record, Mr. Tierney's sitting right there, just so you know.
Hi, Vita. Oh, the first time since last spring you resurrected yourself.
All right, thank you. Steve?
Steve Krinsman from Yarmouthport. I certainly appreciate the concern over Lewis Bay. I think it's justified. But again, I'm going to maintain there is no reason why these projects are mutually exclusive. With the advancements that have been done technologically, I think both sides can be satisfied. To listen to the parade of imaginary horribles about Block Island wave currents and compare those to Lewis Bay, to me doesn't wash, but I think it is a concern. I think we should look at it, but I don't think we should overreact either way. And I am in favor, in case you couldn't tell, of Vineyard Wind doing what it seems that it should do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Long time no see. First of all, I just want to apologize for my absence during the summer. I work till 6 o'clock on Tuesdays, so I'm not around. I have talked with Jenny Landers, our chairperson, and she is going and doing reassignments for the liaisons from Dennis and Yarmouth and our committees. Just a quick update and a few things. Tomorrow night at 5 p.m. we have our school building committee meeting. We're going to be discussing a lot of different things. We've broken up into different work groups as far as exterior, interior, working with the safety groups. We also, at our last meeting, talked about forming, and we will be forming a subcommittee to look at the regional agreement. And one of my thoughts and ideas was to take the document that you forwarded to us and work off of that document and go forward with that, because I think there's good parts to that document that you sent over, because there was some pretty good work done by that committee. New bus contract, so there's brand new buses out there, and they're all up to date, and there's great communications. There's no dead spots with the radios, so they'll be able to communicate with the buses if they need to. One thing I just want to caution the public and the parents is the fact that since we do have a new bus contract, that doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be glitches here and there, so just please be patient for the first week or so, just so they can get the routes and everything squared away. It happens every year, but if we can be patient. One of the things that I'd like to do, or ask the selectmen or Dan, the town administrator, just to maybe put the committee, either the building committee or the subcommittee on the regional agreement on your agenda, so we can come and have a dialogue instead of just going back and forth at public comment. But if we can, maybe get on your agenda, I know it's probably pretty full, but to talk about those things, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hi, Susan Starkey from Yarmouth Port. And we've presented a letter of 102 people compared to the thousands that these folks got, but those letters were definitely from citizens of Yarmouth, and we attached the precinct. I saw a couple of online surveys that were just getting people from any place in the country, so I don't know if those are included in the 2,000 or not, but it might be a bit exaggerated. And I just wanted to reinforce the point that it's really great that you guys are working with Vineyard Wind on a memo of understanding, because it's not saying that we or you support any particular thing or that all the work is done. This is just part of the process. And in order for the concerns that got brought up tonight to get assuredly addressed, most of them I don't think are a problem at all, but and we have a hard time hearing the facts of this. But the point is just that you're doing a great job of saying we've got to get a memo of understanding. We can't just say do nothing, because you are not the group that's going to be deciding it. I'm not sure if people really understand that yet. It will be a siting board that makes this decision. And so in order to make sure that you can help us all protect Lewis Bay and the rest of Yarmouth, we need to proceed. So I just wanted to clarify that for the public. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right, it's going to have to be the last person.
I'll be the Mario Rivera of the thank you, and I will use my 3 minutes. Addressing the petition, we are quite proud of the fact, actually, that we got signatures from people all over the country, various states, ages. You'll notice as you read some of the signatures, you'll notice some of the handwriting is obviously from young people. So we're very proud of the fact that not only do we recognize Lewis Bay as a national treasure, but people all over the country do, and how quickly they were willing to sign up to be stewards of Lewis Bay. We're very proud of that. My understanding is that the petition that was presented to you several weeks ago in support of Vineyard Wind are people that don't even live near the bay. So we are very proud of our petition. We're very proud of the diversity, the number of people, where they came from, and ages. That's number one. Number two, I do have to take this opportunity. This is one of the cardinal violations of public speaking. I do have to take the opportunity to thank various people who really worked very hard on one of the hottest weekends of the year to get these signatures. Many of them are here tonight. Very quickly, David Bernstein, Gail Benson, Veronica and Paul Cove, Joyce and Bill Cullen, John Hickey, Tom Hughes, Ann Monaldo, and of course Judy and Arthur Warren. And riding out of Comaquid, John Henderson, who did yeoman's work when we had the benefit of gesturing toward Lewis Bay to convince people to sign a petition. John was stuck in parking lots gathering petitions, so he did a terrific job without having the benefit of Lewis Bay as a background. And then finally, I do want to emphasize something that was said very early on about the two state studies, the coastal zone management study, which has not been amended. Vineyard Wind will tell you that was very geared toward Cape Wind. In fact, that may be true. I'm not sure it is true. We saw no mention of that in the reading of the study, and the state has had ample opportunity to amend it, and they have not. So as far as we're concerned, that is the state's last official pronouncement about cables in Lewis Bay, which is it's an area to be avoided. So again, thank you for your work. We welcome an additional public hearing. It is a long, arduous process. I hope you're as proud of your citizenry as we were of the work they did that weekend to show you how dedicated we are to the Bay and working on a solution with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Obviously, a great deal of hard work was done by a lot of volunteers to collect a lot of signatures, and for them, I'm sure you spent a lot of time just beyond just getting a signature, explaining the issues to them. So you've done a great deal of hard work, as I said. The state is doing a considerable amount of work as well, and our town is participating in that. And we're well represented by our town administrator, as well as many staff members who are very knowledgeable. This is a complicated application process. It goes through multiple levels of the state government, and we're part of the process, but on a scale of 1 to 10, we're probably a 1 compared to what is going on at the state level in terms of environmental review. We have to depend on their resources for a lot of the technical understanding and opinion with regard to the what is right and what is wrong about the application process. So we look for your patience while we continue through this, and as I said, we're still listening. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we have a official citation to deliver.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recognize Pat Armstrong and Carl Von Hohn from the Department of Natural Resources and Community Services to introduce our staff member, Mr. Jack Tierney, who was instrumental in a life-saving event earlier this summer. Pat?
Good evening. It's my privilege as Director of Community Services to bring forward Carl Von Hohn, the Director of Natural Resources that falls under our department, to speak tonight about an incident that happened in Lewis Bay just a few days ago. I will say that harbor masters here in Yarmouth have a challenging job, and we have 2 boats located, one in Lewis Bay and one in Bass River. And we have a very mixed group of assistant harbor masters that work within the division. We have those that have been with us for many years, and now we're trying to bring in newer, younger people to work the boats who we feel will bring up new issues and new connections with the community. And we always risk having those younger people on the boats. And tonight, you're going to hear one of those wonderful success stories from a family that has many generations lived here in town. And I'm thrilled that we're able to share this commendation tonight with them. Carl?
Thank you, Pat. Good evening. Jack, please. Standing to my left is actually given name of Tucker Tierney. He goes by Jack. So if I go back and forth on the name, pardon me, I tend to call him Jack, and I know the citation is to Tucker. Mm-hmm. On August 10th at approximately 12:30, a call came over the fire radio that there was a potential drowning victim located somewhere in the eastern end of Lewis Bay. Jack was on patrol for us, on Patrol 48 in Lewis Bay, and heard that call and immediately responded to that area. Once he got to that location, he noticed someone on the beach pointing to the end of a breakwater near one of our coves. Jack identified 2 parties on that breakwater and immediately proceeded towards them. Jack at that point was in radio communication with the fire department, advising them of a more specific location for rescue to get to. Jack pulled the boat up to the breakwater, calmly convinced the near drowning victim to get on board the patrol boat so we would be able to transport him to a nearby dock where fire rescue could render aid. As you would think, the young victim was very nervous about going anywhere near the water again. Jack calmly convinced him to come on board, put a a PFD, personal flotation device, on while he was on the breakwater, got him on board, and transported the victim, as well as the Good Samaritan, who saw this person struggling, went out in her kayak, dove under, pulled him to the surface and over to a nearby breakwater where Jack picked him up. We'll hear a little bit more, hopefully in a couple of weeks, with the Good Samaritan that will be attending the Selectmen's meeting. Jack brought the young man to the docks where the Yarmouth Fire Department rendered aid and transported the young man to Cape Cod Hospital for advanced medical services. The young man is doing well. He was transported up to Children's Hospital for some additional care. He was released and is doing well and is back playing soccer with his teammates. So these are the stories that have happy endings, and I'm thrilled with Jack's participation in this call. Jack is a young man. This is the first year he is with us. We provide as much training possible to new hires, which range from first responders, first aid, to CPR, and then emergency boat operations. Jack came to my department through the School to Work program through DY. That's how we got to know Jack. He inquired about summer employment, and we were thrilled to hear that. Hence, we hired him, and we are here today. I cannot say enough about Jack. He is mature beyond his years, and I think he has a very bright future in whatever endeavor he chooses to do, and I hope we have him for a long time to come on our patrol boats and rendering aid and service to our residents and visitors. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Chairman Holcomb.
I'll read the official citation. Thank you. It's Town of Yarmouth Board of Selectmen official citation. Be it known that the Town of Yarmouth hereby recognizes Tucker Jack Tierney, Assistant Harbor Master, for extraordinary heroism. And be it further known that the Town of Yarmouth extends its sincerest thanks and gratitude for the life-saving efforts demonstrated on August 10th, 2018. That this citation is duly signed by the Chairman, Board of Selectmen, on this day of August 28th in the year of our Lord, 2018. And congratulations and thank you. It's always wonderful to have a happy ending to a story, isn't it? All right, we'll continue on with our agenda. We have the Cape Cod Commission update from Executive Director Senatori.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. Christy Senatori, Executive Director of the Cape Cod Commission. I'll be brief. I know you have a lengthy agenda, but I did just want to come by, as I've been doing with all of the boards of selectmen across the Cape, and highlight a few of the regional priority projects that we are working on, and then answer any questions. So like I said, I'll be brief, but happy to stay as long as you want with any questions. So I did just want to focus on 3 regional priority projects that we are currently underway at the Cape Cod Commission. We have been focusing on our area-wide water quality management plan, or most of you know it as the 208 plan, so focusing on wastewater and really water quality in our marine embayments and estuaries. And so we've finalized that plan, and we're really in the implementation phase right now. And as you all know, this is a difficult subject. It's a difficult plan to implement, but we're seeing progress in all 15 communities across the Cape. And what's most promising is the work that we're seeing in shared watersheds, and certainly Yarmouth is at the forefront of these discussions, and you should be commended for the hard work that you are doing in your shared watersheds and your partnership agreements that you're striving toward. We held our 5th annual One Cape conference the week before last, August 16th and 17th, and we were able to highlight some of the progress that's being made, and certainly your progress in Yarmouth was one of those case studies that's being suggested as a model across the Cape. So we will continue progress on water quality, and as we look at water quality and wastewater and our marine embayments and estuaries, we'll also be switching gears and focusing a little bit more on fresh water as well, drinking water, some of those other issue areas that not only impact our environment on the Cape, but also our economy. While we look at water quality, it's also imperative that we look at coastal resilience. So we're in the process of studying coastal resilience across Cape Cod. We have a grant through NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to look at coastal resilience strategies across the region. So while the Cape is looked at from everywhere else as one Cape, as a region, we know that the decisions that are made need to be made locally. So those 15 communities that really comprise Cape Cod need to be in charge of making those decisions at the local level. So what we're doing at the Commission is creating an application that's an online tool that we'll be able to give back to the community so that you can use in your resilience planning. There will be strategies that can be implemented at a regional scale, but we need to make sure that those decisions are handled at the appropriate scale and the appropriate level, especially given the winter that we had last year, and we know that these storms are increasing with not only frequency but severity, and making sure that we are accommodating for sea level rise, climate change issues that we know are impacting our vulnerable coastline. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention the regional policy plan update that we've been working on for some time, but really in earnest since February of this year. And we will be issuing a draft to our Cape Cod Commission and then out for public comment sometime within the next several weeks. And really this represents a shift in the way the Commission is operating, not only from a regulatory perspective, but a planning perspective. So really making more of a focus on providing technical assistance to communities, providing comprehensive planning, and trying to ease the local comprehensive planning process. We know these processes can take years sometimes to complete. So we're trying to make
decades.
Decades, I'm hearing. And all 15 communities are at various stages of implementing and preparing those plans. So how can we make it easier for communities to not only create, prepare, and implement those plans, but make them consistent with the regional plan? We're looking at capital facilities planning and infrastructure planning, and how can we make that process more comprehensive while also looking at streamlining the development of regional impact review process. So it's a document that guides not only our regulatory program, but really takes a hard look at planning across the Cape, and where can we focus planning and growth and development efforts. We've shifted the conversation. It's no longer about whether we're going to develop on the Cape, but it's where. And so if we can identify these areas of activity, these regional activity centers across the Cape where we can accommodate increased density, we can focus our issues around housing into some of these areas that can accommodate additional density where they have the appropriate infrastructure. We can build responsibly. And so those are some of the things that you'll see highlighted in this update to the regional policy plan. So I just wanted to say hello and thank you for all of your effort and your hard work, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. I did just want to take a moment to recognize Jack McCormick, who's been a longtime member of the Cape Cod Commission. He's your representative, and thank you for appointing and reappointing Jack. He did serve as our chair for a couple of years. He unfortunately was unable to be here tonight, but I did just want to take a moment to recognize him. He really is an outstanding member of our board, and so I thank you for appointing him. So I'm happy to take questions.
No, I appreciate the update. I'm looking forward to seeing the draft. And, obviously you know our history, you know the work that we've done, you've been around. So we've taken very aggressive steps in affordable housing and our planning for the growth centers, as you spoke of. So I think more help in the planning is key, and obviously less regulatory and more help in getting us the growth that we need in the proper places. So it's always the regulatory piece that is problematic. And it's not that we don't want to, be sensitive to the environment. It's just sometimes it's difficult getting through the process. So I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see more of a process, more of a clear process for developers in the DRI. I think, I've said it for a long time, I'm very concerned with developers coming and investing for months and years planning and getting to the detriments and benefits analysis at the end, which I find to be very arbitrary. And I think that that's problematic. And so I think somehow it has to either rise or fall on the merits and not on somebody's opinion. And until that process changes, I don't believe you will have the developers come and invest the money the way that we need them to when it's, like I said, I find it to be an arbitrary end to a very long process. So those are my comments. Thank you.
That's great feedback. If I may respond, it's that balance between the environment and the economy, and that's really we've taken a look back at the Cape Cod Commission Act and why we were established and those goals that really set forth the mission of the Cape Cod Commission. It is that balance between the environment and the economy. And I think what you'll see in this draft of the regional policy plan is there are no longer 200 minimum performance standards that developers have to meet or projects have to meet, but there's guidance on how to meet goals and objectives. So we're hopeful that this will be a more streamlined process. We can build on our competitive advantage and make it a place where developers and applicants want to continue to grow.
No, and I appreciate that. I think streamlining it is very important. I think having a clear process is the most important, though, regardless of what it is. If a developer knows what the process is and they meet the criteria, that should be the meeting of the criteria. So when you get through that process, to have basically an arbitrary decision at the end, I don't think is fair. So either you meet the criteria or you don't. I don't think a developer has a problem either meeting it or not and investing the money to be able to do it or to prove it. It's that last piece that really is an issue.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's really tying it back to those goals in the Act where we're hoping to make that benefits and detriments analysis clear for everyone involved. So thanks for that feedback.
Mike?
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you for the update, and I think that your response to Tracy's concerns is a cogent observation that it is a balancing act in the last analysis. And not only do you have to balance the environmental interests with the economic interests, but I think they're inextricably connected, because if you don't have a healthy, vibrant environment, that's why people come here. That's why people want to invest. That's why people want to vacation here. That's why people want to live here. And protection of those natural resources is critical to the economic goals and missions.
Agreed.
Okay. Mark?
I don't have any questions. Just thank you, Christy, for all your hard work on our behalf.
Great. Thank you. I do just have some information I'll just leave with you. Thank you very much.
Christy, I do have a couple of questions.
Right.
Thank you. That's okay. You can't get away like that. First of all, I wonder if you could, resilience, can you tell me what you mean by that? I think I know based on some of the things that you said, but is there a definition that the Cape Cod Commission is using with regard to that?
There's several definitions, and it depends on the context in which you're framing resilience. So we've been looking at resilience, and I think a lot of people are looking at it in the coastal resilience framework and how can we bounce back from natural disasters and from storm events. And not only are we looking at it in that framework, but we're also looking at it in economic resilience and community resilience. So really, how can we as Cape Cod, how can we as a region adapt to change? And so that's kind of the framework that we're looking to define resilience in. There are lots of definitions out there if you go for a search for resilience, but how can we as a region be adaptive to and respond to change so that we can be a vibrant and sustainable community?
In that regard, we've had some experience in the last winter with impact of major storms and took some financial hits as a result of that. And I know other communities on the Cape have had the same thing happen. Not the same thing, but similar things happen. And in our case, the impacts were sudden and uninsured or uninsurable. And that might be something that the commission could take a look at, is how do we protect ourselves from the financial impact of major events? Can we find a way, either through the state or the region, to ensure against the impact of these things? I mean, it's very difficult for a community to react quickly. Resources are limited, and so I think we need a broader look at that issue, and a way to help the communities respond to natural disasters, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess the other major thing is, any type of development effort, any improvement in wastewater that encourages more people to come to the Cape, will have an impact on transportation. And I know the Cape Cod Commission is very deeply involved in the Metropolitan Planning Organization, but certainly the planning for our state roads and federal roads through the center of the Cape is an area that requires constant emphasis and re-examination. It seems to take an awful long time to get improvements done, and and that extends to major issues on state roads within towns. I think over time, those of us that serve in government tend to develop a patience that wouldn't be stood for in the private sector. And I think that there are issues I know in Yarmouth and Dennis with regard to bridges that really need attention, and it's very difficult to get people's attention to those issues. So, I think that needs close examination. So, thank you for coming, and I really appreciate your input and your insight into what's going on. So.
Great. And just to address your last point briefly, we will be updating our regional transportation plan in the fall as well. That will have a public participation component to it, but that does allow the region to prioritize projects as far as resources go. So we certainly can come back, and that can even be a separate transportation discussion at some point, or we can invite your board to a meeting to participate, because we do want to make sure we're responding to the needs of each individual town, but also the region. So
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. All right. Okay, we'll go on to our next item, which is a public hearing. This is a continuation of last week's public hearing with regard to recycling fees.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I'd ask that the public hearing be continued to the date of October 2nd, due to the preparation needed to respond to the board's requests about fee generation and cost of the operation. So they've got a game plan they've put out, and they need some time to work on getting that in front of us.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Well, thank you for putting us back on time. All right. We'll continue on. We have a presentation from the Cultural Center on Public Art. Good evening. How are you tonight? Good.
My name's Lauren Wolk. I'm the Associate Director at the Cultural Center. Thanks for seeing me tonight. It's a very simple request, actually, but I'll just give you a little bit of background. I know we've already met with you once about permission for part of this project, and we're back for more, but I'll just bring you up to date. So the town of Yarmouth and the Yarmouth Chamber of Commerce and the Cultural Center, as a triumvirate, have all the resources needed to create a network of public art in the town. And this network will help us to create a village center in South Yarmouth, give purpose and draw attention to underused areas along Route 28 and elsewhere, boost cultural tourism and enhance quality of life throughout the town, and set an example for other Cape communities and play a leadership role in the region. But several of our plans for this sort of overarching project for the town have sort of been put on hold because of the work that is scheduled to take place on the intersection of North Main, Old Main, and Route 28, and the Bass River Bridge, which were sort of the center of a constellation of related projects we hope to undertake. In order to get the ball rolling, though, and to pique public interest and to make some impact, we decided to start with stenciling, which you already approved for a limited area. Stenciling is very inexpensive. It's very easy to do, has low impact, and we decided that we would start with the parking lot across from the South Yarmouth Library, across from the Cultural Center. You gave us your permission to do so, and we have done so. And the results have been wonderful. The reaction has been tremendous. And we're inspired to continue our work throughout the town with our limited budget. The Yarmouth Chamber of Commerce has really been a leader in this because they have provided the funding for this and are very invested in public enhancements throughout the town. And they can see the virtue in a very small crew from the Cultural Center and hopefully elsewhere, armed with a small amount of money, being able to make a pretty big impact. So we're here tonight to ask your permission to proceed with other sites throughout the town. Sites that are owned by the town. I believe you have a list, but I can go through it. And you also have examples of the stencils that we plan to use. We have purchased the ones that you see in the packet, but we hope to purchase others that will suit the environments that we hope to focus on. So the Chamber of Commerce parking lot, for instance, is a wonderful site. The libraries, the beaches, the parks, and the golf courses are where we'd like to go next. We would like to, of course, collaborate with the people who manage those sites, and Pat Armstrong has given her full-throated endorsement of any stenciling on the parks that she oversees. We've already talked to the South Yarmouth Library, and they want to proceed as soon as possible. We assume others will be equally enthusiastic, but of course we'll go on a case-by-case basis. But we really need to start with you and getting permission for this to proceed. So that's why we're here. Mary, did you want to add anything?
Thank you. Mary Vilbon, Executive Director for the Yarmouth Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to let you know that approximately 2 years ago with our contract with the town, we added a line item for public enhancements. And that's when the Chamber started to maintain the Gateway Gardens that you see at exit 7 and 8. We purchased holiday decorations, installed those during the season. And this started a conversation about 1.5 years ago. And we actually engaged Karen Green in a presentation about public art. And we see the value, the quality of life, the attraction that it has for a community, and how we can engage our community members in possibly doing this stenciling as well. So we hope you will support that.
I should also say that we hope to engage people who own private properties, merchants, restaurants, hotels, other merchants who have highly visible properties and would allow us and perhaps even finance the creation of murals and other public art. We have plans for a sculpture at Packet Landing, but all of these are increments of the project that we will get to. This one we have started on because it is so low budget, low impact, but high visibility. It just seemed a natural. So, you have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Let me just say thank you really for all the hard work that you've put into this. This is just a wonderful initiative, and I love the way you engage the community, engage stakeholders. You make it a very community-oriented, highly participatory initiative, and I think that's a wonderful approach. I really do, and it does make a difference. It does add to the quality of these special places, the environment, and I just can't thank you enough, really, for all of the effort, and you, Mary, and the Chamber for all your support. I'm just an enthusiastic supporter of this, and we can't do enough public art, So hopefully we can continue to keep things rolling.
Absolutely.
Really, you've done a great job, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. It's a partnership, and the town's been very supportive.
Mike, any questions?
I don't have any questions. I like your designs very much, the schools of fish, the compass, the footprints of the sand, but I don't see a shark. Can you like do a can you do a shark eating a seal or maybe a person, something like that?
We have lots of plans, actually. And the expensive part of this is when we create a stencil, when we can't find one that's already made. In fact, though, we would like to raise enough money so we can engage local artists to create designs that we can then have produced as stencils, so that we are supporting artists at the same time as we are creating public art throughout the town. And of course, we can use these stencils again and again and again, so it really is very budget conscious. But a shark, absolutely.
I think this is great. First of all, I love the electric box wraps still. I think that that's been a wonderful addition. But I guess I just have a little bit of a concern, and I think it could be taken care of administratively. I think that we need to have some type of process where when you have a stencil and you're going to put it somewhere, that Dan perhaps signs off on it. What I'm afraid of is that we are going to have a free-for-all art, and people are going to be painting public spaces, and we're not going to know if it came from you or if it was, you know what I mean? I just don't, you know, I completely trust the two of you, but at some point in time, you know, I mean, there could be a stencil that offends somebody. I just think that somebody from the town should look at it and say, okay, that's an appropriate thing, that's appropriate place, and sign off on that. So if you guys can work that out,
We'll be back when we have other designs and other plans. Since we're doing this incrementally, we figured we would only ask you for what we know we're going to do. Okay. We would love to do a whole lot more than when we've proposed. No, but we understand this has to be something that the town approves of, and so we will be back to you with other plans, and we won't be making it up as we go along.
Okay, great.
Okay. Now, if the public sees this and decides, as I have to tell you, as we were stenciling the parking lot, many people walked by and said, "Did you get permission to do that?" And we said, "Yes, we did." And they said, "Well, I really want to do some too." And I said, "Well, then you need to ask permission." And then, of course, if you get it, the more the merrier. We think that this town has enormous potential to be a canvas for all sorts of art, but we also do not want it to be a free-for-all. So we're right with you.
Thank you.
Do you have an eraser?
A really big one.
Magic eraser.
I mean, I suppose if you can stencil something in, you could probably go over it with an appropriate color.
You certainly can.
If people were outraged, you know.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that anything we are doing would offend anybody, but of course I understand that there are lots of opinions out there.
Yeah, you're right.
So we'll definitely be back to you when we have other things to propose.
I think this is just a wonderful thing, a wonderful project, and I could see it going on for quite some time, you know, with a lot of different opportunities in town. So, thank you. You know, it really is kind of too bad we don't have a colored slide or something to show so the public could see it this evening.
Beautiful. Yeah.
But it might be something appropriate. To put on our station, to show the types of designs that are envisioned, and I don't know
what make a link to the website to do that. You know, we could scroll the photos that there's there.
Sure, we have pictures, and we will send them to you as we make progress. The Cape Cod Times called yesterday. They saw this on the agenda, and they're sending a photographer.
Oh, that'd be great.
They're very interested in the project. Yeah.
Get good publicity and let people know the types of things that are being done. And are the you know, these are our black and white. Are they?
The stencils can be done in any color.
Okay.
So we will have lots of color. We started with white on black because we were doing dandelion heads, and that seemed appropriate. But we'll definitely do whatever suits the site best.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we need to
make a motion to approve the public art as amended by?
Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
By the way, were you able to work with the state with regard to the Bass River Bridge?
We are going to be, we've been told, at the table to talk about how we can make this a beautiful bridge as well as a functional bridge without going over budget. But we're not the only ones invested in this project. There are many people who want to weigh in, and on the intersection for that matter, because there's a lot of potential there. And if you make the public art as you're creating the intersection, it's much more affordable and it just makes more sense. So,
So they're open to dialogue on it.
apparently.
Yeah, good.
Which is a good thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to give a little bit of illustration to the chairman, the Mass DOT has come a long way, and is it opportunities that towns get and to rehab various areas, and they're very amenable, I've found, to even as long as you have a plan that you want to have and you've got support in your community, there's many avenues, federal and state level, to finance what you're looking to do.
Good.
So we have a lot of different dialogues going on about those projects on a lot of fronts. So this is now the opportunity to plan for that.
Great. Okay. Wonderful. All right, then. Next item on our agenda is the Barnstable Water Agreement.
Yes, I'm pleased to report that arrived in the mail today, signed copies of the water agreement as represented to you last meeting. What I would ask for is if you would entertain a motion to allow the town administrator to sign on your behalf to execute the document. We can get that authorized and underway.
So moved.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Didn't you say last meeting that the Comaquid folks were going to get compensated for the water charges, the excess water charges?
Yeah,
out of the base water fee?
Yes, the delta.
That's how that's going to work?
Yeah, we will receive a payment based on the base rate that you see in the agreement, and it's escalated to coincide with a potential rate increase that may be in the coming for the Barnstable Fire District. So we'll get that money incoming from Barnstable, and we will issue the credit to the Comaquid Heights area. We've worked out an agreement with Barnstable Fire District to pay such that the money will come from us as opposed to them. They didn't want to get into a more complicated billing situation. So Mr. Colby has been our envoy to the Barnstable Fire District to work out those details.
I appreciate all your hard work on this, Dan. I know that it wasn't an easy task that we put upon you, but, and I think it's really important that we convey to those people that this is, I think we need to educate them, first of all, in the history.
Yes.
We need to continue to look at the options and what the cost to hook them up is. I do think that there is an issue with them not getting water bills and us putting information in our water bills.
That's a really good point taken. They had mentioned to us that that's a missed opportunity for town communication. So we're going to go back and do that. And to your question about the cost of hooking up, we haven't really done a good engineering evaluation. So we're going to be working on that and get that to you in a later date to consider.
But I think the biggest thing is conveying to them that this is just temporary. I mean, we can't, we don't know what the future's going to hold, but this is.
Yep. Thank you.
So I appreciate
that.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome. I'm trying my best to keep us on schedule here, so.
Okay, doing well. You're better than expected. All right, we have a presentation on the committee handbook.
Yeah, so this is a draft. There had been some commentary back and forth over the last year on this. I would like to turn this presentation over to Mr. Dwelly. He was instrumental in getting this draft compiled and put in front of you for tonight's review.
Thanks, Dan. As Dan mentioned, before you is what I would characterize as a rough draft of the town's potential board and committee handbook. The idea behind this type of document is to provide our existing and new committee members, volunteers, board members with some helpful resources around scheduling rooms, decorum in meetings, information regarding state statutes such as open meeting law, and what we've done here is we have worked internally with the individuals, the staff who are responsible for committee work. So Pam Barnes has worked on this. in conjunction with Phil Gaudette, who, as the town clerk, when he swears folks in, has a one-on-one and a relationship with many of the committee members. So we've taken some time over the past month or so to compile this. It is borrowed heavily from existing board and committee handbooks that are currently in place on some of the Cape towns. And so, understanding that this is your first look at this, I'm happy to answer any particular questions that you have. But in terms of next steps, what I'd ask is that at your convenience, please convey back to Dan and myself any suggestions or feedback that you have for this document so that we're able to incorporate that. We'll send that back around to staff at Town Hall for any of their feedback as well, and then plan to present you a proposed final document at some later date.
I have a couple of questions. I'm not sure.
So you're really looking for us to just take this evening, study it, and get back with questions?
Yeah, that would be great. But if there's anything
Okay.
I can answer today, right now, the document or the process or some of the things that we've included, I'm happy to elaborate further on that.
Okay. All right.
I just have a few things right out of the top. The committee appendix, I think, is somewhat dated. I think one of the things that would be helpful is identifying whether they're elected or appointed. Like we have, it says on here, the Disability Commission, that's by, we don't have an active Disability Commission.
We're still searching for members.
Yeah,
We
you are.
authorized it, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
All right. So elected appointed, I think, is important. And we have other policies that aren't incorporated in here. One of them is like the removal policy.
I think that's in here.
I didn't see it.
There is a section on removal.
Yeah.
I did include a section on removal. I believe I copied the language that was included in the charter. But if there's a separate policy, happy to provide. That's a great point. If there are additional addendum that we can provide that are policies and other resources, I think that's a great thing that we'd want to do.
So the ethics from the state, there's a website that I don't know, at one point in time, the state was pressing that they went online and took an ethics test. We, at one point, had to do it, whether or not that's in here. And then I think explaining conflict of interest. I think that's important.
Okay.
I think conflict is very important. I agree with that. I think that so many times comes up as a question, oftentimes misinterpretations.
Well, one of the things, too, that people think is it's within the town's ability to determine that, and it's not. The town can't determine whether it's a conflict of interest. It's between the person, really, and the state. So they have to do their due diligence, and I think just a piece on that process and what potentially could be and how they go about identifying it and, talking to the town clerk and filling out the forms. And those were my just general comments off the bat.
Okay, other comments? Sure.
Do you have this document in Word format?
Yeah, absolutely. We can
All
send
right.
that out to you.
Because there's a few just technical things that I think I can help you on in terms of, there's sometimes where in front of the chapter of the statute, the designation as chapter's missing, and just a few little things like that. I could probably do it more quickly in terms of redlining it for you.
Great.
I think it's very good. I like it a lot. In addition to the points that you touched upon, Chris, it tells people how to apply and to become a member of a board or committee or commission, which I think is good. It talks about the functions of various boards, commissions, and committees and distinguishes between those that have advisory roles and those that are statutory, like the Rec Commission and the Board of Appeals and Planning Board. For examples, it gives some really good advice about what our responsibilities are as board members, and what I like in particular that's included in here is the, under reminders, the statement that an individual member can speak, of a board can speak as a private citizen, but should not purport to represent the board in the absence of a vote. Sad to say, I don't think that's observed as strictly as it should be. I've been at meetings and seen people at all board levels, and I don't think this board is really spared from that criticism either, that people talk without telling people, look, this is my opinion. You know, it doesn't represent a vote from the board. The only time anyone has the authority to speak on behalf of the board is if there's a vote for the board to authorize them to do that. I remember at the pay-as-you-throw hearings, I was just elected back in 2013, people saying, well, what do you think about this? Or what does the board think about this? And I said, well, time out. First of all, I'm not here as a representative of the board. Secondly, I can tell you my opinion, but I can't tell you what the board's opinion is because the board didn't vote on that, and they didn't vote to authorize me to say anything. So that's that's critically important, and I'm glad to see that that's in there. And Norm's constant reminder to people about civil discourse is the next reminder. So I think Norm would probably welcome even more than me that particular reminder. But this thing is pretty comprehensive, and I think it's a nice handbook, guideline, quick reference source to anybody that comes in. And people have different levels of experience with committees and commissions and boards and town government. Some people don't know anything other than, gee, it might be a good idea to get on one. And for those people in particular, this is like an A to Z manual. So I'm very supportive of it. I'm very happy to see it develop to the point where it is. And I don't think there'll be a lot, from my perspective, I don't think there'll be a lot of revisions, but there are some minor technical things I think I can help you out with.
That's great.
That's good. I think this is an excellent first step, Chris. I would also want to thank, an expression of thanks to the intern that helped you organize this and put this together. I know this was a project and with many hands, but typically, and it's great to see interns in town hall being given assignments like this. I think it's terrific that you've got this internship initiative going, and they're helping out with projects like this. So by all means, I think kudos to the intern that worked on this. One of the things that I have done as chair on the appointments is I've literally compiled all of the board policies written over the years dealing with committees. And so to help me keep it all straight, I've highlighted numerous sections that I think are important to emphasize. So I think what I can do in helping you get this in a final form is to maybe identify some areas that are worth stressing in some of these other policies that the board has developed to make sure that everything is consistent. Because I don't think we want to repeal any policies. I think we basically want to make sure that we incorporate as much of those existing policies, particularly the key points, in this document.
That's great. And, you know, Mark, perhaps we could even meet if that, if that makes sense. That'd probably be great.
I think it's terrific that you have this in this form. That way we can sit down and literally go through section by section. And I can go over some of the policies that I think, because it's amazing over the years the amount of work that the board has done historically in terms of coming up with policies and recommendations on this particular topic. So I'd be happy to go over that with you and highlight some of the key areas. One of the things I also wanted to mention is in the back section where we identify all the committees, which I think is terrific. One of the things that I would caution us on is actually naming individuals for the various committees, because then it becomes out of date relatively quickly. I noticed that in the Cape Cod Regional Tech section, we actually name the individuals. So my recommendation would be on this section, Appendix 1, that we just try to keep it to the committees and the structure and the legal basis and those citations, because once you start, you can't stop, and then it'll be out of date, you know, within a year, and then you'll be revising it every year. So I think in order to keep this clean, it might be best to just sort of dispense with that. But other than that, like I said, I think it's an excellent first
I
step.
think there was only one instance where that was named, and that was the Cape Cod Regional Tech representatives.
Correct. I didn't see any others, but
And that's because Chris is here, and she has special status.
And we knew Chris was going to be here.
that's why you put it in there. Very good.
But I agree with that. I mean, it's going to change from time.
Yeah, it's going to change regularly.
No, you're 100% right.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, an awful lot of work has gone into this, and it's a comprehensive document. I want to take the time to really absorb it. I started reading through it, and I want to think about it, relative to my own experience in different committees and so forth, and make sure that after thinking about it, that it covers what I would want to know as a committee member. I do, it's interesting, the first sentence, which is, and it might be a matter for some further discussion at a later time when we look at this again, but it says, all Yarmouth residents registered to vote. Now, I know there are some requirements in the charter, are there not?
There are.
I wonder about that in relation to why shouldn't it be all the Yarmouth taxpayers?
So they wouldn't be able to go to town meeting and participate as a committee member, as a taxpayer. They're not a registered voter.
Well, they could come.
Well,
but
then they have to
wouldn't be
sit
able to
behind the
vote.
fence.
Unless recognized, yeah.
I think that brings up a great point that I've been saying. I think it is problematic because some of the committees, Dan, for instance, is a representative. We have staff that aren't taxpayers or residents or that are on our thing. The CEDC has the Chamber of the Commerce Director as part of it. They may not be. We had the same thing with the Cemetery Committee. We had non-residents. So I think we have to. It gets technical. I think that it's a representative by however the charge says it is.
It probably would be better to say residents, because not all residents are registered voters, but residents are people who live here and participate in the life of the community. And then you could just put a footnote in. There are a few exceptions, as Tracy mentioned, that where you don't have to be a resident, but you could handle that in a footnote and say except for.
I think, I mean, we could say specific to the charge too. I think because that's
Bingo.
how it is.
Or you could say with few exceptions, and then run the sentence from there. It's just.
But typically, as Tracy said, we typically look to the charge as sort of the controlling, and the charge is usually based on charter or bylaw,
right?
If it applies.
Yeah, I know one of the things we've touched on is wanting at some point to have a meeting for non-resident taxpayers, and just thinking about this particular item, I wonder if there's an opportunity to have a group of people who might come together periodically for just advisory purposes.
I believe, to your point, there's, I'd have to do a little bit more research on that, but a few towns have non-resident advisory committees that do prepare, they meet periodically and they prepare, it's like their position on things, when before town meeting comes up and whatnot, so we can look further. I know that was a desire of the board. Dennis has a pretty good model for that, so we'll reach out over there.
Brewster has a non-resident or a sort of summer resident association, and they meet every mid-August. So we can tell you all about what Brewster does.
I think the fact that a intern did this is important. 'Cause to Norm's point, when we look at it, we think about things that would be helpful, but then when you're in it, you forget, like, from the outsider, what the perception of this would be. And, while all of it's so important, volunteering is scary for a lot of people because they don't know, and they don't know what they're getting in subject matter. They feel like, oh, I don't really know that well enough. Well, you learn it over time. So once this is done, it would be really nice, and I've been talking about this for for a few years now, ever since, I think about Jerry often and what the work he did with volunteering and the video that he did. But it would be nice to have, I don't know what the cost would be, but we have some awesome volunteers. They do a lot of work, and you know what? They have fun. And when you read this, I don't think that comes through, because we need this. This is important stuff.
official.
But there's, the friends I've made over the years, you can't express that through something like this. And it would be nice to have a little video that maybe we all get together and show clips of maybe each meeting, a few things, and play it on the TV so people see, what they really do. But I think
Well,
a little PR.
suggestion.
I think just having this handbook is going to help people overcome whatever anxiety or reluctance they may have in terms of just getting involved. I'm not suggesting you can't do other things, but just given the bandwidth of folks in town hall. I mean, I've been pitching videos on all sorts of things for quite a while.
We've listened to you, Mike.
Okay.
Well, it's time consuming, and you
It
guys are
is.
busy. I
It
get it.
takes a
but I
lot-
think
it
it's
takes a lot of
important for
work.
people to see, and it would showcase our volunteers that do so much work as well. But I can tell you from being a previous appointments chairperson and talking to my friends that have nothing to do with government and trying to convince them that it's fun and to get involved, and a lot of them are just very overwhelmed with not knowing. And I'm like, you learn it as you go along. You're going to find something that interests you, something that is you don't want to volunteer doing something that you don't like. It has to speak to you and be a passion. But there's so many different opportunities that there's something here for everybody.
I would
And so
agree.
we have to show that excitement to people.
I would
So,
agree.
That's my
Can-
cheerleading.
Can I just ask, Mr. Chairman, the name of the intern? Is it okay to name that individual or no?
So you beat
School.
me to it. I was going
Okay.
to save it, but
I want to make a pitch.
No, absolutely, and I would certainly been remiss to not mention. So, Alexa Griffin is a senior at Mass Maritime. She's actually an emergency management major at the academy, but she was interested in some of the other projects that we have for her. So, Alexa is working on and primarily spearheading our digitization efforts for our trail maps. So that was mentioned at a few meetings back, but she's been working with Karen Green and Kelly Grant. She gave a great presentation to our department heads and division heads a few weeks ago about the number of miles that she's walked. So she actually spent her summer walking all of the recreational
13.8
trails
Wow.
in town with a GPS ping, making sure that she pinged the coordinates that you then transfer into a new digital map. There'll be hard copy maps, but it'll be a great thing and a fantastic resource, and we're really excited to release that to you. But that was Alexa's primary project, and then I saw, how great of an individual she was in her work ethic, and thought this would be a great thing for her. She essentially did all of the legwork in compiling all this information. She's the driving force behind this. We were hoping to actually have her here this evening, but unfortunately she also works in the evenings as a server, so she couldn't make it. But we hope at some point to be able to recognize her.
That'd be great.
But she knew this was on tonight, and I told her to, if she could, to watch the video, because we wanted to thank her for this great work. And I certainly appreciate the feedback, not only on this document, but for the fellowship program. We've had, I know the town's been doing it for a long time, but we've had some fantastic success over the past year getting some really great projects across the board with some really great individuals. And it's helpful. A lot of times you get kind of tied up with some of the day-to-day goings on in town business, and it's really good to have these folks to be able to come in, provide a fresh perspective, and get some of these really nice-to-haves enacted and off the list. So.
If I can just ask, it seems like many of the interns are from Mass Maritime.
Mass Maritime has a really great program, and
Yeah.
we've been able to develop a really great relationship with the academy, and have had great success with them.
So we owe a shout out to Mass Maritime as well, I guess.
Yes.
One other thing I just thought of when I read it, it mentions that meeting are run by Robert's Rules of Order, and I don't think that's the case here. I think the town of Yarmouth goes by town meeting time, which is a different...
No, I think, if I can just comment, I think for town meeting, we use town meeting time as the principal procedural set of guidelines. But for committee meetings, I think the norm is to use Robert's Rules of Order.
I'm not sure. I don't
Okay,
think that's
that might be worth double checking.
I'll look into that, yep.
Yeah.
And then just one last piece, if I could, Chairman, just to respond on the video question. So Trace, that's a great idea, and Mark, you'll appreciate this. We've been in touch with the Cape Cod Media Center to start generating some ideas about quick clips and videos that we can put together.
Awesome.
We've initially reached out about some of the major recent advancements related to things like such as the drive-in site has been pitched as a potential video. We're thinking about the capital and operating budget process to kind of educate people around that. But I think a video around volunteering and how to volunteer would be a great thing. It's a quick thing, a quick clip, and it'll help people and maybe encourage them to come and volunteer for the town, or at least give them a glimpse of what the experience is here. So we're working on it.
Thank you. Great.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. Next item on our agenda is the 2020 budget review. 2020.
Hard to believe, huh? It's coming. So we started the process just like about 2 weeks earlier, I think, this year on our front of it, just to get ahead of it. There's obviously a lot of things that we're juggling. What I would bring your attention to, this is a draft policy statement. It's very essentially the same as it's been the last couple of years. I would point out to item number 9. We are getting ready to do a Standard & Poor's ratings call, and one of our soft spots is the amount of money available in the stabilization account. We are predicting that we'll have a pretty robust free cash year again. I don't want to say the amount because it's all preliminary, but it's pretty substantial like it was last year. So we wanted to kind of announce to the rating agencies ahead of time that the board supports using a significant amount of free cash to bolster up our stabilization account. There's obviously, as you know, some aspects of our economy that make it challenging to move from AA to AAA, but we're hoping with as robust as the tourist economy's been, that we'll be able to make that jump. And just on a side note, because a lot of conversations that I run into across up and down the Cape is, how's the season been, and now that we're wrapping it up, one of the true indicators that we've had a good year was given to us yesterday at the department head meeting when Mr. Colby made the announcement that we've had a record year at the septage plant. By all records. So that means a lot of people came to town. Absolutely. So that's probably not one of the Chamber of Commerce tourism metrics, but
Usually we use traffic
yeah,
counts.
right. So, but that actually is a great indicator that the economy has been percolating along here in town. So.
Well, that could be from any town, though, right? That's
Well, that's what I mean. We take in haulage from all up and down the Cape, and we've had a banner year apparently. So we'll get some numbers to you on that. But that was key to get us in position as a policy, because that'll go to a Standard & Poor's as in advance of the rating call. So
that update was a load of crap.
I try to keep it from smelling too much. But
Just kidding.
the other item, one of the things that we've discussed a little bit in the past is that, and this is not a knock about anything, but the board has been generous in its support of a 2.5% tax levy as a pretty much a pronouncement during these statements of policy, and so the departments that I supervise get conditioned to expect a certain level of growth, and so that can be counterintuitive to trying to, because periodically people will say, why do we have to go to 2.5%? Well, the answer, there's a lot of different answers, I suppose. But one of the things has been, it's been in the policy. So we did do a minor tweak last year on question number 2, or policy statement number 2, include an increase of up to 2.5% within the limits of Proposition 2.5. So it becomes, like I said, we discussed this a little bit about the signaling that goes on with town meeting and an article associated with benefits and wage. If we put that out there, the bargaining units know essentially what the position is. So I necessarily say that how we've done things because we've been able to afford that. And what I would say in getting to know a lot of cities and towns, we are in significantly better condition on many of the things you would look at, like the condition of our infrastructure, the buildings particularly. We've made up great progress since the budget problems of the 2008, 2009. So you'd hate to reverse course because a few off years in that area, can really set the ball back and get you behind the 8 ball. And there's a viewpoint that says, while times are tough now, you should really work on trying to work on those things that need attention. And we do have I wouldn't want to mistake it, there is an enormous list or backlog of things to attend to, which obviously you're well aware of being in town. And Christy had mentioned that, we were discussing with Carl today the erosions issue, and you had last week the stormwater debate. With every spring, you need to think about how many culverts are going to get washed out. I remember last year in springtime, the roadway to Siegel Beach was pretty much underwater, and it got eroded away, and there's a critical situation there going on with a culvert. So, we run things very tightly here, but we have so much coastline that, there are some big ticket items lurking in the horizon. So it's just an observation that's been made, though, as it relates to managing the workforce and how things have been messaged to them in the past. That's all.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, Dan. One of the things that I've noticed in a number of towns is that there's the increase in the number of fairly large rainfall events where we have literally an enormous amount of water being sort of dumped on our roads and in communities. I know this year we've had a few fairly significant rain events, an enormous amount of water. I know in some of the other lower Cape towns the same thing has happened. And you're seeing some communities now, as they look at their drainage projects, they're looking at maybe redesigning some of these areas because of the amount of water that's now coming in. I don't know if we've noticed.
Yeah, the engineers, they have, a lot of things are, I forget exactly, but whether it's a 100-year rainfall event they plan for, but they're talking more now like about the 500-year rainfall. And certainly what's not been missed on me is in Western Mass, the amount of deluge that's been occurring all summer long has been unbelievable. Right. We've missed a few, but we've had our fair share of episodes here, and certainly if you go up to Wellfleet, they've had a few good dumps up there as well. And these are hard things for a municipality to manage, because when they do strike, if you get hit, you don't have a lot of money to deal with it. And it's a hard thing to manage, the balance between what the burden of the taxpayer can stand versus the needs that we have to attend to. So like I said, I brought that up just as a general point of observation. But from my perspective, it makes life a lot easier to signal that out, that's where we're going to be, and I can build around that. We can actually really make some great progress on a few things here in town.
One of the things that we've been fortunate enough is in our capital is to keep that number. Whether or not that number is adequate to achieve the goals or not is another question. But I'm thinking a lot about the multifamily housing projects that are coming and how that's actually going to impact our operating budget in terms of additional school children, what year you plan that coming into, and how are we going to plan to, we need to prepare for that.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, because I do know, because I've asked this question, the Mattakees school building project, the Cavalier project was not even factored into what the impact could be. There is some talk that you're going to get a little bit of internal movement within the town boundaries, but certainly if you have more available apartments, inevitably you're probably going to pick up some more folks from outside the town to some degree. But nobody's analyzed that to any great. I do know the chief of the fire department, Chief Simonian, has talked about the impact of the Mayflower Maplewood facility, and that has been almost like unbelievably needy to our town services, but also having a structure as big as the redeveloped Cavalier site is going to definitely add call volumes, and certainly so there's an impact to bringing in that kind of development, no question about it.
I just want to make sure, do we know when that's going to?
Well, the groundbreaking is scheduled for later September, so it's probably with about an 18-month time frame or thereabouts. So
probably not within the 2020 school year.
No, probably the next one, yeah. Okay. I imagine that's going to be wildly popular, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we see anything else going online this as next year? in terms
Not
of-
for anything that would affect the population. I mean, if you were to ask me, you know, we're getting capital budget requests coming in now, but I don't see anything that's would lead me to believe that there would be anything other than level funded on the expense side. And then the adjustment, obviously, because of the article on the wage, we're closing out 3 contracts that we had got across the board, and then we're opening up negotiations soon
In
with the
October
fire
1,
department.
we'll have the,
Student enrollment.
Yep,
Yeah, so, like, you just, you know, knock on wood, because, you know, one storm event or something could significantly change our forecast, so.
I guess one of the things, going back to what you were talking about, Dan, on the an increase up to 2.5%. And it's, you know, the question really, or it really begs the question of what is affordability in our town?
Right.
Because I think that, you know, if you look at the segments of our population and consider what is affordable to you know, 40% of the population that's on fixed income, that's a whole different concept.
Absolutely. This is a document to support your situation. This is some of our financial metrics. This is what Christie had dropped off, but that points to your commentary when you look at our situation here financially. We have a pretty significantly challenged population, for sure.
Mhm. You know, I think, and I think in particular, when you talked about contractual arrangements, to the extent that our union leaders believe that, oh, well, 2.5% is affordable because that's what they've got in their budget, when in fact that isn't supported by the incomes of our community members. Ultimately, what the end result of that is, it'll drive people away, and they'll be replaced by, I don't know what, who knows. But you know, I think we have to have a handle on that as to what truly is affordable, and look at that as well as the Proposition 2.5 numbers.
You know, I suppose when you reach a certain point with your reserves, there's kind of a balance that you'd have to make, that if you're carrying too much, it's counterproductive to the entire affordability equation, right?
Correct.
So the idea then is that perhaps at that point, when we reach that magical number, you could determine maybe you'd want to use some of that available cash potentially as a tax relief item. I had done that in the past, where in Westfield I would signal to the unions and the employees, we'll take care of business, and we'll make sure that we're paying our bills, and then whatever's left over after we've done that, we're going to provide property tax relief. So there was never a guarantee of anything other than the fact that we'll look at all of that. And in the end, I think probably 4 out of the 6 budgets were under 1%, and maybe one was 1.5%. I only had one that went to 2.5% off the levy. A lot of the things, though, that go into that, you know, what's the contributing factor? The receipts, the local receipt. If you have good revenue receipt, that's very good. If you have, you know, stabilization with the state aid to the schools, that is helpful as well. So, but it becomes a policy issue for you, you know, and it was always explained to me by Labor Council that if you got too much money in the bank, you're just going to give it away again. So do something productive with it. Yeah.
Right, and you know, Tracy alluded to the capital requirements. You know, and I think we have to, even though we've got numbers in here, I think we have to be sensitive to the fact that maybe those numbers are too high, and maybe that should be a use of our free cash as opposed to funding those within the levy.
Yeah, we'll run some projections towards the fall as a rate. We'll give you an update on the 10-year. And one of the things that I'm mindful of is the impact. The borrowing that would be needed if Mattakees passes is a number that probably hasn't been seen in this town in some time. So we want to definitely be ready for that for sure, and have some available options. But there's, as you know, there's other big capital items percolating in the background. Once we get it all laid out for you, and Rich has done yeoman's work on that in the past, we'll be able to make better informed choices. And Ed Centio has, over the last couple of years, set up stabilization accounts for different things. We'll have an article for town meeting this year for the beach stabilization account that we had with the sticker uptick in sales, so that we'll begin to get ready for the beach infrastructure that we know is aging and showing signs of deterioration for sure. So that is all very helpful, but in the end, we're going to potentially be hit with a lot of need, potentially, like I said, depending on how the town votes, to finance things that haven't been seen in that magnitude in a long time.
Okay. Any other questions or comments at this point? Do we have a motion on?
Oh, I'm just, you know what, we'll ask for the next meeting to confirm it, give it, unless we're off track on that, Chris?
We are not necessarily. If the board wants to make an official position tonight, they can, but we just wanted to kind of give you a preview of the information that we were starting to put together, because we wanted to start the process a few weeks earlier this year to provide everybody, the board included, some additional time to be able to put together their requests and make sure that everything is compiled in a timely manner.
Has this been, has FinCom had an opportunity to?
The FinCom has not, but I had meet with Ken Moody the other day about what the policy would be as it relates to, there's no change really other than getting the town ready for the ratings call. So they're familiar with this, but we'll certainly put that on the radar screen.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, Chairman. So Dan, the calendar?
Oh, so along with that, we've also included for your review the budget-related calendar that has been, it's also included in the long-term agenda. These are the key dates, the milestones that administration has to hit and that the board has to hit as it relates to the whole budget process, so that's been laid out for you as well.
So what we would like tonight, if possible, after a quick review of the calendar items, is a official or unofficial confirmation from the board that these dates are okay. And that
Still question marks in some of them.
On the bottom, in terms of elections and voter registration, I guess let me clarify. Confirmation around dates related to budget guidelines and budget presentations, because that'll allow us to finalize our guidance for operating budget to departments, so we can kick that process off a little earlier, as mentioned. And the second piece that we're hoping for tonight is just a brief discussion on who the board would like to see come before them for their budget presentations, and how often would you like to see them? I recall last year, I think capital budget came
4 times?
Or a few times. So we just wanted to get some general guidance so we could fill that in, slot that in, and really just put together an entire outlook of the upcoming budget process for 2020.
Board have input on that?
If I do remember them coming often last year. The first time was kind of like an overview, but we didn't really have anything of substance to have a conversation about, so I don't know.
Chris has worked hard to streamline that process with the chairwoman. So I think that maybe 2 or just 1 would be, other than the hearing that you have to have at the in the springtime.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I think you guys would be good with 1, but if you want to have an initial one, that could be a recap of last year. It could look at, what we funded as a reminder for capital requests and our plan this coming year, but I defer to the board on that.
Do we have the vehicle policy in place?
It'll be in front of you very shortly.
Okay, so I think that was one of the things why we wanted to set the tone with them last year, if I remember correctly, in terms of making sure that was there. I do remember one of them kind of being, not, like I said, not as productive as it probably could have been with information. So maybe I would say once, and then maybe
at the hearing.
Yeah.
Tracy, could I just add to that? So we've started the capital budget process this year, met with the chair and members. We actually had a pre-capital meeting to lay out expectations and everything for the year. It's our first year kind of taking over the process, as through the transition in prior years it had been disseminated out to some staff. One of the things that the Capital Budget Committee was adamant on, and this was based on the board's feedback, was to incorporate some type of vehicle replacement analysis, assessment, something that would help them to determine departments' requests and the validity of those requests for vehicles. So Rich is here. He's been working diligently with the vendor to finalize that vehicle replacement and vehicle inventory policy. It's in draft form, but what we did take from that draft form was the vendor provided us with a vehicle assessment. It's made up of a whole bunch of characterizations that user input information around mileage, vehicle hours, annual maintenance costs, how it's typically used, whether it's used frequently or infrequently, and all of these things essentially calculate automatically into a score, and that provides the committee and anyone looking at that with a quick assessment as to recommends immediate replacement all the way down to this vehicle is in great condition, you don't need to replace it if things stay this way for, let's say, 5 years. So we've incorporated that into the capital budget guidance for this year and have asked all departments to make sure that all that information is filled in. So what you'll get is you'll get a comprehensive view of all the vehicles and equipment here in town, and you'll get that assessment color-coded on essentially what needs to immediately be attended to and what's good to go. And so understanding that you haven't seen the final vehicle replacement or inventory policy, you know, this assessment that we've included in the capital budget guidance for this year doesn't necessarily need to be what we move forward with in the future, but the capital budget committee was insistent that they wanted something included this year, even if it was just for 1 year, to help them better inform their decisions and provide you with a better assessment of what we're looking at.
They did a good job with their grading last year with what they had to work with. That was a bit of an improvement. The only thing that comes to mind for me about last year was free cash. It seemed to have a different process last year. I think what would be nice is before it goes to the committee and goes through all that work, that perhaps staff, because there was some stuff that was a surprise, I think, to us. So maybe we could, before it goes to them, we could have a first view of it. We can give your comment.
Of
give our comments.
you mean like the requests of the staff for free cash use?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, before it goes to, I mean, I think it was kind of like already almost.
Well, you could have said at any time, we could have
Well,
pulled
we
anything
hadn't seen
off.
it. I think we were the, like.
You're the boss. Yeah, no, understood. So, in the past, it had been pretty well defined based on, I think, past practice as to what was going to be asked for. And so what we're trying to do now is, just so you know, this is an exercise that's taken about a week to do. We're underway now. Before we ask for new money from the board and the taxpayers, we are going through every single article that I think they tally up over $1 million potentially, that has not yet been expended by a department. So we're sitting with each department in getting from them the plan, because there's a requirement that the article be renewed or emptied within 2 years. And we've had a few that have been sitting around a long time. So I'm going to give you a report soon as it relates to what the status is. And before anybody asks for any new money out of the free cash situation, it was going to be, we've identified who's got money available from past articles and what's the plan to execute those. So I don't anticipate, we're getting to meet with everybody and get what their needs are. I don't anticipate, like in the past, there's been a pretty robust new money asks. Other than the traditionals, I think there'll be one for erosion because we're concerned about storm response and having some money. There'll be one, actually, Bruce Murphy has instituted a grant program that I think will align nicely with your opioid policy, and so I'd like to bring that in front of you. But that's our goal for this year, was to use old money before we ask for any new money. So, but we'll bring any ideas to you ahead of time.
I think on capital, as I recall, you know, there have been instances where we've had a presentation with documents only a day in advance, and that's tough for us to really absorb and look down the list and try to figure out, you know, what kind of questions even to ask. So I think if we had, you know, a week or two to really take a look at it, before we get to the meeting, I think that would be helpful and might reduce the number of times that we really have to review the capital requests.
I'll work with the committee to ensure that that happens.
Okay.
So preliminarily, to Selectman Post's point, we'll, whatever's cultivated out over the next few weeks on potential free cash ideas, we'll get that as a list to you before it gets put in any other format, so.
Okay. All right. Any other items with regard to the budget?
Well, so I guess, I mean, maybe not tonight, but at some point, it would be good to know who, in terms of departments that the board would like to see. So is it the big ones, you know, public safety, and then schools and public works, you know, is it every department?
Well, some
Just
of
want to
it's
get a
by
sense
charter.
of who you want to see.
Right, some of it's by charter. The schools, we always have to
Yeah,
have
the hearing.
public
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah.
That was a case where we got the information at the last minute
Yeah.
as well.
Right.
And we had police, fire,
Public
obviously,
Works.
capital and finance.
Yeah.
Community
We do
yeah.
zoning.
Yeah.
Zoning has to come.
Community services we can put together. You're going to get a lot of golf information coming up by October 2nd anyhow. But those budgets, those are pretty lean to begin with. It's libraries, of course, Council on Aging, and DNR and Recreation. But we can put that together in one format, kind of like in a presentational form without a elongated event. And if there's any, you know, one of the things we did talk about, any expenditure that is beyond what was incurred other than salaries beyond last year, this year's number, we were going to highlight what the cost driver was on that. If something particularly was the cause for the reason why there was a additional add-on in the budget. So that should help a narrative. So to the extent that we can cut down on the amount of presentations, we will, and just provide you with the detail that has explanation for it would be.
You know, I think, I know what I found last year in reviewing the budgets, just is that, you know, I went through the major categories. I wanted to see the major departments, in other words, with big requests and in terms of total dollars, here, just to talk about their budget presentation, not only as a matter of whether their budget was appropriate, but also to understand more about what they felt their needs were and where they might see future challenges. You know, and I think it's important for our board to hear that directly from, in particular, the chiefs and probably DPW as well.
Sure.
Yeah, but there were, and continuing, there were other budgets I looked at and I said, okay, well, there's no increase. The salaries are running, you know, below expectations or whatever, and I don't know why we have to talk with them, really, you know, unless they want to. You know, I think it goes both ways in that respect. If a department head believes they want to talk with the board about issues that they see confronting them in the future, then I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, on your agenda, look ahead, there's a presentation. You know, probably the most significant thing outside of the public works issue that's on the horizon of our different departments would be the library situation. So they're wrapping up that, I don't know if you'd call it a feasibility phase, but they're wrapping up this first phase, and they want to get your guidance on what the next phase should be. 2 years from now is a planning grant opportunity that would set them up for construction grant in the future. So that's, you know, that'll be a big one, and that I know Jane wants to share that information with you, and that's on the agenda for October. So
okay,
something of magnitude like that, we certainly would bring in front of your attention for sure. So.
Okay.
I think it's important for public education, not only ours, but when this stuff's on the horizon, you know, I think in totality, you know, we get it pieces, but people can start planning forward. I mean, I think one of the biggest problems with the capital is that the Cape Tech project hasn't even hit their tax bill yet before we start. You know, so these are all things that go together.
Does that give you enough clarity at this stage?
I agree with Norm. I think that there's a lot that, as it goes forward, you'll see the items that probably are going to have questions, and some of them, like Norm said, are going to be pretty status quo. But
I think as long as we see the major departments and then look at specific questions or issues, and I think that's fine. And then if we have particular issues with regard to other departments, then we could bring those up as we go along. But, I think police, fire, DPW, and I don't know any other,
timing is hard, though, because like I remember in years past, we had those pretty early on, which is how we developed the funding for the PAC program, and how we defended, after the presentation, we decided that the free cash would be best used for the stretchers. So it's out of those presentations that kind of stuff comes.
So both police and fire will be with you very shortly to give you their, an opportunity to go back at the matrix report. And I know one of the items that came up was that 12-hour flex shift, if you will, to address the call concurrency issue. And one of the things that you could do, to Selectwoman Post's point, is use a free cash grant to some degree to try a trial run. We obviously have to negotiate our way through that with the union, because that's a significant change. But we could, using some of the safer grant money we've put away, project what the cost would be if we went down that road and trial it for a period of time, because it's one of those things you can make it look like it could work, and we will run that analysis, and it did look like it would work on the matrix schedule. But, a couple LOD injuries along the way, and you're into overtimes, backfilling, and all good planning goes out the door. So I would never want to do something like that without having a redundancy, a safety net with a backstop of additional money. And so one of the ideas that came from that is the LOD. How do we address that going long-term? We've had, I was made aware of another retirement coming on a disability situation, another LOD case out for a year. We've been backfilling that position with OT in the fire department. So, how do we backstop that? Because every time that happens, we continue to pay them 100% wage, and we have to backfill their positions with overtime typically, right? So I'll come up with a plan to backstop those very severe cases and present that to you. But there's a lot to consider if we're going to try to do something different. But that's a good chance the chiefs will be able to run that by you, whatever their ideas are.
I love prioritizing that one-time incentive for things that are a small investment that saves money. Oftentimes, we're not able to do those things that actually, in the long run, save us money.
It would save us money, that's right, yeah.
Dan, and I don't want to go too deeply into that issue, but, it seems like for both police and fire, hiring for officers that are retiring occurs after the fact, but then we've got the situation where we have to backfill with overtime for long-term disability situations. Why do we have to do both? Why can't we hire for the LOD situation and anticipate retirements in that fashion, get people trained and ready to go, and so that we're not spending the overtime dollars, we're spending it on straight time on people. And sure, if we, let's say we estimated wrong in terms of when a person was going to retire or when a person was coming back from disability, well, compared to the time and a half impact, having that person on board gives
It's an overtime driver. Oh, no question. So a couple things I think that would be. So the timing of an academy is a problem, right? So you have to, you've got lists of people. Hopefully the list is up to date and current, and people respond or they haven't found another job. So the police academy, for instance, is 13 weeks long. So that you have to not only find a candidate, get them in position, find the, we try to, get to the academy point, wherever that might be. So while all that's going on, say you have 43 patrol spots, you already saw we're generally, because of the split shifts, we're already very lean to begin with, and often in an overlapping overtime situation anyways. But the problem becomes is we don't have an appropriation to bring somebody else on. Now, interestingly, to your point, what we're going to try to do is, if I remember correctly, try to make a provisional appointment in the instance in which if the person, if it's a provisional, they get hired under no expectation that it'll turn into a full-time position, to try to cut down on that. So we're working through some of that, but it's not necessarily easy to do. And we would need to have a couple of different vehicles to be able to do that. If we had that long-term LOD account financed, say somebody trips it at month 9, we can then pay their wage off the LOD account, and then we could make a provisional appointment potentially. So there's, it's because there's union contracts involved and all this other stuff, it's complicated. I think we can get there to some degree, but it's going to take probably a pilot project to trial it for a period of time to see if it'll work.
Are there any opportunities for cooperation with another town?
Well, we already do a lot of that. With the fire department, we are constantly going over there, or they're coming here, whoever those are. The mutual aid network, Fabric is...
No, I mean in terms of hiring.
Well, we just lost, we're losing people to other towns. I lost another firefighter the other day that's going over to Hyannis. So there's a little poaching going on, and I know I would get Frank's opinion on that, because we're so, it's hard to imagine. We are just in a desperate situation for qualified candidates up and down the Cape for everybody. That there is a little bit of movement going on between departments, but it all comes down to the highest bidder. So.
All right. Well, if we can come up with some creative solutions, it'd be great to that issue. But all right, ready to move on?
We are, thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's go on to, do we have any appointments this evening?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you.
In your packet, we actually have appointments for the Energy Committee and the Historical Commission, but I'm going to hold on the Energy Committee. We'll take them up at the next meeting. For tonight, I just want to ask you to focus on the Historical Commission. I would like to recommend the board reappoint Jack Duggan and Duncan Oliver as regular members of the Town of Yarmouth's Historical Commission. These appointments are for a 3-year term to run through July 2021.
I'll move those appointments.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It carries. Thank you. I would recommend that we reappoint Kathy Heislop as an associate member to the Town of Yarmouth Historical Commission. This appointment is for a 1-year term, which will run through July 2019.
I'll move that appointment.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It carries. That concludes my report for tonight.
Okay, thank you. We have executive session minutes of March 27th, 2018, May 22nd, 2018, June 19th, 2018, and August 7th.
Have these contracts been
Yes.
executed on both ends?
Well, they're, the MOAs are executed, and
So I'm just wondering if we're approving and holding, or are we approving and releasing?
2 police contracts do not have final signatures, and they have not been implemented from a payroll standpoint until we receive final signatures.
So we need to hold them until we have those. Okay.
Make a motion to approve the executive session minutes and to hold.
We have a
And
second?
can you further make the motion to release upon execution of the contract?
Yes, yeah.
I'd like to do that. That way we don't have to revisit this.
I'll second that.
Okay, discussion? Okay, those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Upcoming agenda review. For some reason, I have 2 copies here. I'm not
Why?
sure.
I think you have a updated copy. What we tried to do is
Okay.
use the existing 8.5 by 11 format to provide you one column that has all the budget
The same.
information, in
Okay.
it, on the column it's like in the middle of the page, I believe.
It didn't get in there.
They're both
Didn't
the
get it.
same
I thought it was gonna be a
they're both
handout.
Exactly the same.
They are exactly the
Okay.
same? All right. I don't have that, so.
You want one of mine?
No, I probably got one in the office. But that's the plan going forward so what you'll see mixed in, I guess, in the copy that you have is, I think it's in italics, are there all the budget related and, those deadlines? Those will be moved to a middle column, the column that right now on page 1 has just,
Normal way?
normal way, you're right. So that'll become the budget column, okay? So that'll
Okay.
make everything easy to follow going forward.
Yeah, I think that'll be helpful, and, you know, I think in particular, as we get down toward annual town meeting, having the clarity on what has
Yes.
to be voted when
Correct,
is
absolutely.
really important to us.
We always are shuffling papers at that last
That's
minute,
right,
you know,
that's
so.
right. Yeah,
That's the
exactly.
plan. So the next iteration of this document will be sent to you that way.
Okay, so the next meeting,
September
Mike, you'll
11th.
be in charge. I'll be in France. I won't be listening.
You sure?
Sure you don't want to call and do remote participation?
I have one word for you, though.
I wouldn't,
Écoutez. That
you
means
know,
listen.
I don't know how to do that. I'm going to buy a cell phone, I guess, when I'm there. I'm not sure what, we'll see what happens.
I was kidding. Enjoy your time.
Thank you. And,
My retired friend on his fixed income.
We'll have a moment
That
of...
always drives me crazy.
Oh, there we go.
Mine was fixed too,
Well,
just so
good.
everybody
Well,
knows.
you know, yeah, I've been looking for a 2 to 3% increase in selectmen's pay for a long time. It hasn't been coming along, you
You
know.
just got to make a motion to put it forward, come on.
Yeah, I have to be the first one?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Any questions on the September 11th? Just one comment. I know we had in our correspondence this afternoon
Yeah.
some information with regard to Vineyard Wind.
Yeah, I'm going to take them at their word and
Yeah.
maybe against my better judgment, but I'm hoping that they've got a week to get us some documentation to take a look at. So if they get something by the deadlines, we'll have it for the 11th.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. You know, whatever you folks want to do at that point, you know, the memorandum of understanding does nothing in terms of binding our town to
That's
anything. It simply, as we envisioned it, would provide us with sufficient funding to study what the proposals are and what the valuation is.
October 2nd, I plan to introduce to you that night, we'll have a first discussion about the election coming up for DY. The town ballot part, there's a memo, I think it might be made it to your packet, I'm not sure if you got it. But if not, I'll share it to you by email this week. It's related to the deadlines. I think it's October 30th. We have to make Phil would like a decision before that, because he has 35 days. We have to act within 35 days to decide whether or not we want to put a town ballot question together to finance the school project potentially. So I figured what we could do is have a discussion on October 2nd and then follow that up with a potential vote, if you'd like to, by the 16th. And that would give us, Phil, enough lead time to get a ballot if you decided that you wanted a financial ballot on there on the election date, to get it drawn up and ready to go, and you could have a chance sometime in November to see that. Otherwise, we'd run the risk, the next meeting would be scheduled for October 30th, which is right at that deadline, the 35-day
I mean,
deadline.
we have to.
Yeah.
There's no real option. So if he could just draft something for us to look at.
Yeah, well, that's what I'll have on the 2nd of October for you. Yeah.
We could absorb $3 million.
What, to not fund OPEB?
Be not fund quite a few things, but
Worst comes to worst, yeah. I've got some, I'll have
Yeah,
some
that's
kind of retrospective look at what that would look like.
Do you even know what
damage.
year, the first year will be for the debt?
No, not yet. We're still trying to work with their financial team, the borrowing consultant, on what all those projections look like, so.
I mean, our municipal budget is about 60 million? Is it, what is the exact number?
Well, it's,
gross?
to have money available, it'd probably be, close to that. It's just under that and the assessments on top of that to DY.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, So a 5% savings across the board.
It would be
in the
painful.
municipal budget
Yeah,
would be, it would be very painful.
I tell people the books have to be balanced, and it's going to happen one way or the other. So if we don't get that support, then it'll get done, but it's not going to be pretty, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I spent my afternoon, Norm, to your point, going through the files of 2008, and it looked pretty
to look
brutal
at what
back
was
then.
done
Yeah,
then?
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Very much a similar circumstance. It is not pretty at all.
No, it wasn't. And there were some doubters about whether it would be done.
That's right.
But it got done.
And you know what? I would say probably we haven't fully recovered all the personnel associated with that, recovering some of the deferred maintenance back, but, you know, we made it through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reserves have come back, and so you can get there, but it's tough.
Well, I mean, you know, the reality is if we simply said, well, we're going to find a way to avoid any tax increase this year, any municipal tax increase, that's half of the amount. And that's, you know, so there's, that it doesn't, you don't have to look at one option, but in any case, that's a tough subject. All right. Any other comments on the agenda at this stage?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
And I guess this is for the chair and Dan. With no meeting on September 18th, we need to make a decision on if you want to do a presentation on the end of the fiscal year report, and if you want that concurrently to follow, or if you want the Board of Selectmen's official budget policy statement to follow at the same time. I mean, you could do those out of order if you want, but I know we'll need an official vote on the policy statement if we want to follow our calendar here, so.
So the official vote needs to occur by the 18th? So it could occur on the 11th?
It could occur on the 11th, or we could revise our FY20 budget schedule.
No.
We could do it next week.
I would try to get in position for the 11th.
Why do we have so many things on a schedule when we don't have a meeting?
No, those are the items in italics that'll appear in the normal way column in the future. So, yeah, those are all budget-related items.
Those are budget
But
reminders.
But we voted on the Barnstable Water Agreement tonight, correct?
That's done, yes, so that'll
Can
come off.
for next week.
Yep.
Yep.
So can we take our budget policy next week? I mean,
Sure.
The 11th, September 11th.
We can do the policy, I don't know at this point if the finance team is ready for an end of the fiscal year report. And if you wanted that presented at the same time. So I guess that's the question.
I would.
Well, you know, we'll check in with them tomorrow and get back to you. Yeah. I know the books, we closed the year out already, so I think we're in pretty good shape, so we'll see.
I mean, is there any, would there be any benefit? Dan, you're planning to submit the capital improvement plan to the budget committee on the 18th. Is that's the first look they'll have at it?
Yeah.
Okay. I know typically that has not been shared with the board. Is there any reason that can't be at that point?
No, we can, you can get the simultaneous email on it.
Yep.
When the document gets
you know,
generated.
at least that gives us some.
Oh, you mean it for the 11th? Or?
Yeah, I don't know if you'd be ready for the 11th.
Probably
for the
not. Capital budget?
We would not be ready for the 11th, no.
But it could be circulated to the board on the 18th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just can't comment on it.
Ouch. Ooh. Okay. Just stuck myself with a pen. All right. Further comments then on the agenda items. All right. I guess our Is Jay going to present us with the legal requirements
Oh, yeah.
with regard to the school vote?
Yeah, he'll, he essentially, once we get the language from bond counsel, DY bond counsel, on what their ballot question is, we'll have all that packaged up in a presentation for you.
Okay.
But what I wanted to bring it back, though, was, speaking of Jay, September 11th, we're scheduling I'd like to schedule an executive session to talk about the DPU hearings we have to get in position to represent the town on for October. So there is a position statement that Jay and I have been working on that we want the board to review in advance of that, and what the legal strategy is going into those DPU hearings. So that'll be 5 o'clock on September 11th.
That's with regard to Vineyard Wind?
Vineyard Wind, that's
Okay.
correct, yes. I mean, we have to have a presence to cross-examine their witnesses
Yep.
at those hearings. There's there's a bunch of them, but I think only 2 have little project significance to us. The most of them are related to shore impacts and onshore and offshore impacts.
All right, so that would be an executive session.
That would be
on
an
the 11th.
executive session briefing, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then, getting back, Jay would have a presentation to us at some point.
In his October office hours related to the school financing situation, yeah.
All right. Is that, how does everybody feel about it? Is that sufficient time?
I'm fine.
Okay.
I don't know if you're talking about the same things or not. I think
yeah,
what
talk-
Norm was referring to is Jay said that he would bring in some information showing what the permissible levels of involvement would be for the board on the school budget issue.
Yeah.
In terms
Right.
of advocacy, in terms of recommendations, and things of that nature. And he suggested that he already had some literature along those lines that he would be providing us. I think that's what you were
Yes.
referring
Yeah.
to.
Yes, it is. Yep.
You might check
Okay.
with him and
Yeah.
see if he can do that when he comes in, or he didn't seem to think it would take a lot of preparation.
Right.
My impression was he already had all these
Okay.
pieces in place.
But that's going to then kick off discussion among our board as to what we want to.
Not necessarily. I mean, we could take and receive the information, and he can kind of let us know what the parameters are, and we can stop there until you get back.
Okay.
If you decide to come back.
So you're saying you're going to do that on the 11th? That's fine with me, if he has
No,
time on the 11th.
it would be more
That's
of a,
fine.
it would be
That's
more of
fine.
a briefing on his part
Okay.
to let, in providing information. Again, if he's prepared.
Load up the 11th.
Yeah. Well, we just took something off, so.
Well, we can Skype.
All right, let's go on. Individual items. Mark?
I don't have any tonight.
Okay. Mike?
The only thing I had, and I guess it jumps ahead to the consent agenda, and I'm not looking to pull anything off of it. I have one comment and then a question. The question that I had was on the appointments of agents of the local licensing authority. It says to serve until an updated list is submitted by the chief of police and appointed by the Board of Selectmen. The questions I had, Dan, is how does this list compare to the previous list that we approved, number one? And number two, why is there just why is this a temporary measure? Why isn't it more in the nature of a final list?
You know, we had this question posed to us as it relates in one of the cases that was recently in front of us, and the town clerk had opined that you are appointed until you become unappointed. So I believe in order to clear up any ambiguities, the chief of police would like to go on the record as it relates to this listing of officers, and that there are a number of retirements, and there might be some other staff changes I know that are coming down the road, that once those are executed, he'll probably submit to us the, for what I would call the final list, if you will. There's a few names I already recognize from those personnel movements that they're gonna have to come off of here eventually for the next iteration of the list. So, but I think he was just trying to clarify that for any enforcement case going forward, these are the agents of the license board.
Okay, and that's going to be updated.
Yeah. There's, like I said, there's a number of personnel movements coming up pretty quick.
Okay. And the,
We're on individual items, Mike, not the consent
no, I
agenda.
understand, but
Okay.
it was, the comment was on, I can't find it, but it was on the fundraiser for the hockey. I just wanted to,
Sea Dog?
yeah,
Pub?
let people know if somebody has that. Here.
That's never been on the.
No, here it is. No, I think, well, not hockey, but they had another item on.
It wasn't on the consent agenda. They came here. I'm just wondering why.
This one's on the consent agenda.
No, why? That's my question.
Why? I believe, and I don't know, I think it's more the administration's initiative, and I don't have any objection to it. The policy has been, in practice at least, that if somebody comes forward and we have a hearing and we grant them permission to do something and there's no problems, then the next time they come, it's pretty much put on the consent.
That's my understanding, as it was explained to me.
And we've had many events that have proceeded on that basis. But I just wanted people to know that there is going to be a fundraiser for the DY hockey team at Sea Dogs Brew on September 22nd, 2018, between the hours of 1 and 5 o'clock, with entertainment until 5 p.m. And so that's a fundraiser for the Dennis Yarmouth hockey team. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. We'll move on to the consent agenda then.
Yeah, so to follow up on that, on this consent agenda is the Sea Dog Brew Pub event, the licensing authority, named agents, and the donations that we get normally for both recreation and YPD donations.
Move the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Town administrator updates.
Yeah, just a couple of things I'd throw out there. We had a DHY meeting Friday, and it was discussed within the working group. We're now in the phase of that process to think about putting together a negotiating team, and the group had requested that we each administrator go back to their respective boards and ask for up to 2 board volunteers to serve in that capacity, along with a finance committee member, and then along with a representative from your water advisory. In our case, it's the Clean Water Advisory Committee, and report back to them at the next DHY event if we have volunteers. And this is where the rubber meets the road, if you will. This is the agreement language that will govern a potential document that eventually would get to town meeting that could set up the wastewater plant entity, if you will. So I can't sugarcoat it. It's going to be a tough lift, but I need help. So and they specifically thought that it should be 2 different board members. I throw out a little bit of a rule on this, is that if we're going to bring everybody like that together in a working group, that we have strict rules to adherence to an agenda, 1 hour, and I think much like we did with the school negotiation, I hope we get a better endpoint, but we broke down that document into manageable sections so that each meeting we came together, we could get through and make some progress. And so we do have a draft document that has been generated, and that's been used up at the Mansfield, Norton, Foxborough plant to begin from, but to make this a manageable event so it doesn't occupy an inordinate amount of people's time, because the boards are obviously, as you know, are very busy this time of year too. So you don't have to give me an answer tonight. If you think you want to serve on it, just let me know in the coming days, and we can go on from
So
there.
you're looking for how many?
2 board members, yeah.
2 from our select
Yes,
board?
so Harwich would send 2, Dennis would send 2, Yarmouth would send 2. Each one would also send a FinCom member, and then also for 1 person from their advocacy group on the wastewater event.
Okay. What are you anticipating in terms of calendar?
I would say it's probably going to get, I think we had a date sometime after October 2 or so is when that group would have its first meeting, I believe.
Okay.
Yep.
And then how frequently?
Probably twice a month initially.
Okay.
Yep.
And do you know a day of the week?
Has not, we would leave that up to the group to decide what would work for them.
Okay.
The idea, though, would be that this group would work on the agreement language, which is separate from the other work that the DHY original group works on, and then once a month we'll get an update as to how that agreement language is progressing. So.
If nobody else wants to do it, if it's not during business hours.
It will not be during business hours, so.
I might be interested.
Like I said, I don't need the answer tonight. I'll give you some time to think about it. Like I said, it's not going to be an easy thing to get through. It's probably have the same amount of energy that needed like we did with the DY school agreement. You know, it's going to be a tough situation for sure.
Well, it'll be a tough situation, but I don't think it'll be as difficult as the school, because you have, first of all, you have another third party involved. And even more importantly, you're not locked into an existing agreement from square one, and that's a huge difference.
Right. Yeah, it is.
In the school situation, we come to the table locked into what I consider to be a very one-sided agreement that the other side didn't really want to move from. And that's really the bottom line. That's the tail of the tape.
I would agree.
You know, we could discuss all the items that were, and ideas that were put forth and all the debates that were had, but I remember one member of the Finance Committee basically saying every dollar that we spend is a dollar that we didn't have to spend before. And that's true. That's true when you're moving off of, you know, like I said, a very one-sided agreement. So I think the dynamics are much different here. I think if we had a similar situation with Dennis and we were approaching the issues anew without any pre-existing agreement, we probably would have had a good, fair result long ago. But the thinking over there is we have the best of both worlds now. Why should we agree to anything that deviates from that? So different dynamics, and we have, you know, another town interjected into the formula, which I think could prove to be beneficial.
And they've done it already. They did.
A little different scenario. Yeah.
Agreement with on the other end.
Pre-existing plant, correct. And we are building from a document that was gotten through a very tough situation up in off Cape in 3 towns. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So when do we?
If I have names by the 11th, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
By the next meeting, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, do we have any potential for renewal of discussions on, you know, on the DUI school agreement at this point?
Well, I've had a discussion with a member of the Dennis board, and he encouraged us to get back together in a room. I suppose at this point you heard from the liaison from the school committee that they plan to pick it up.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that's it, you know, but I am remiss if I wouldn't mention the fact that what would there be left to negotiate if they didn't move off those questions that they answered for us? And I think that's if they took a vote tomorrow over there that said, you know what, we got a little ahead of ourselves on those questions, on those answers we gave you. Here's a revised set of answers that gave a wiggle room, then that would be a different scenario. But that's what they sent to us. That's
There were, aside from language issues, there were really 3 essential issues, correct, Norm?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
One was how to calculate the enrollment numbers for purposes of allocation of capital and operational expenses.
Right.
The second issue was we thought we had an agreement in principle to share, I think it was $2.9 million in operational costs that were culled out of the budget by Carol Woodbury herself and Rich Bienvenu.
Right, and those would be split 50-50.
And those are going to be divided equally, yes. The third issue was on capital. We really wanted a 50-50 split, but we're willing to bite the bullet and go with a 60-40, 60% by Yarmouth, 40% by Dennis. We never got any kind of a response on a fair allocation of capital or any allocation of capital at all.
There was
none.
Right.
So no proposals came our way on capital. There was some back pedaling on what we thought was an agreement on those $2.9 million in fixed operational costs. I don't think we ever really got a response or a definitive response on how to determine the student population.
Right.
So then they stopped the meetings.
Right.
We were willing to continue. They stopped them. And then
it's even further than that. They'd claim, and have publicly stated, that we agreed to stop the meetings.
We did not.
We did not agree to stop.
No, they unilaterally stopped the
Right.
meetings.
They unilaterally.
And then they wrote a basic letter saying, you know, we can go ahead and discuss the other issues. Well, there weren't any real other substantive issues.
Right.
The rest of it was just clarifying language and things of that nature. So I suspect that they may be trying to shape public perception in a more beneficial light than it really is. But what I just said, I'll stand behind. Those are the facts. I'd be happy to continue negotiations if they were willing to agree to split those $2.9 million of fixed operational cost equally, and if they were willing to assume 40% of capital costs. But if they're not going to agree to those things, what are the issues? There's no real meat on the bone to
The only thing I've
discuss.
Again, is, and it's all that I read in the newspaper, is they've said that they're waiting for a response to their
Well, Norm,
return letter.
terms that come to my mind to that is smoke and mirrors. I mean,
Well, I don't know, you know.
But first of all,
should we respond?
I'm confused about who responded to our letter. It was not the Board of Selectmen
No,
that
it was not.
responded to our letter.
That's
That's
correct.
the first problem.
yeah, I think what was
They
that,
have
the administration?
refused to take a position from the beginning. It is them that needs to make the decision. And in my opinion, right now, it comes down to one item. It comes down to capital. Because the other items can be worked on. That one thing, when we're locked into that, and that's what frustrated me about the school committee sitting on that for two months and then saying they're going to take it up, but not until after we pass this. Well, once we pass that, we're
Correct.
stuck with that forever.
Correct.
The only thing I think that we need an answer on right now is, are you willing to move off the mark on capital from the Board of Selectmen, yes or no? That's really what it comes down to, because if we could hold the town meeting to amend that, that would be great.
And there's no, you're absolutely correct.
Worked
in-
on later, because that's not going to cost us a significant amount of money in a year's time or 2 years' time, and we can work on that.
I think I would amend what, I wouldn't object to that approach as long as the other facets of the agreement, including an agreement to have future meetings and to reach agreements, is part of that agreement. But if all we end up with is an agreement that essentially has us over the barrel all the time for the future, I don't think that makes any sense.
This subcommittee should have been taking votes and minutes as we went along to start to
There were.
narrow.
Oh, we were. We had minutes and we had votes.
Why don't they, they're not.
And then there was an agreement, Tracy, that said we wouldn't make any votes until we went through and discussed all the items. And then at certain strategic points, they, in the meeting, says that made motions and voted not to agree to our proposals.
That's
It was
my
a
point,
circus.
So, but why didn't the Board of Selectmen get that memo? It was addressed to them. It was not responded by them.
I don't think that it was.
I thought it was, we
I
sent
think I
it
sent it to the chairman.
Yes.
Right.
Not
Did
to,
you-
not to
did
the
send it to the
subcommittee. We want to hear from them, the leaders of that town. I want to hear from them. Because this back and forth about whether we should meet or not meet, or it's ours or them, you know, they didn't make any counter offer proposals. Nothing.
Right.
They said they want no change. That's what it came down to.
Pretty much.
With Mike, what is there left to talk about? Here's what we have. It's either a yes or no. Either you want to talk about it or you won't. You want to move off the mark or you don't. This is ridiculous.
Norm did a great job in terms of presenting an exposition of how this subject of capital contribution in regional school districts is handled in other parts of the state, particularly the western part of the state, where they do it based on the equalized values, in which case, and he only did it for purposes of illustration, in which case Dennis would have been paying more than Yarmouth, I think something like 55% or thereabouts. But he also said, look, we're not asking for that. We're establishing a context here. What do you propose? What are you proposing? And it was brought forth on many of the agenda. Dennis's response on capital.
Right, and there was
And we never got one.
Never a response.
We never got one. All the meetings we went to, we never got one.
Well,
I
it's exactly as they planned, in my opinion. This is what they wanted, and this is, that's where we're at. We're stuck with it.
I think,
It's not,
I think we need to bite our lip and say, okay, we need to respond. And regardless of the fact that we believe that we already provided the context for their response, I think we need to respond directly to their Board of Selectmen and indicate we are willing to meet, but the central issues of capital sharing need to be addressed immediately. And then the subsequent or additional items with regard to operating expenses can be deferred, however, must be negotiated by such and such a period of time, or something to that effect.
but we're too late to do this and deal with a subcommittee that may or may not get to them eventually. If that's going to be the case, if they are willing to discuss capital, then our boards, both full boards, will come together and discuss capital and get in a room and make a decision. Because the way that they're doing this is they're using the subcommittee to be able to continue.
I think Tracy has a very interesting idea. I mean, why don't we
They're not
set
responding.
forth and say, look, if you're interested in going further, then we'd like the two full boards to meet
On capital specifically.
on capital to start with, yeah.
If I could, to that point, I can draft a letter and have the chairman sign off on it. If you can give me a motion to authorize me to write the letter requesting a meeting between the two boards to talk about that topic, I'd gladly do that.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay. Mark, you've been silent over there. That's, yeah. Here's your chance.
You don't want to hear me talk about this.
Unfortunately, I'm disappointed, and I'm thinking it probably isn't gonna, but
I think we have to put something in front of them, regardless of the fact that we disagree that it's absolutely necessary, because we've made our
got nothing to lose at this
position
point.
right. We've made our position very clear, and we've corrected the falsehoods that have been given to the press, and
I've
but
had a couple of
one way or the other.
I've had a couple conversations. One of the conversations was with Bob. Bob took the memo as, he interpreted the memo as we wanted them to pay 100% of the administrative costs
Right,
based on
right.
the wording,
Yeah.
and that he was waiting to hear back from us.
Yeah.
That was basically.
We never
Never discussed that.
said that
Never.
we were gonna have
Never-
them pay.
and-
That's the way he interpreted it.
I think the meetings would have ended long before they did if we made that
Right.
proposal.
Right, that's right, that's right. That was-
If I may,
that was-
the DHY group is planning to call all three boards together anyways in October, because they want to have one unified vote for that special act legislation that we've been working on. There's been some last minute, I'd call them minor edits from House Counsel. So, there's an opportunity there, so we'll be together, but I'd like to get this letter sent off with the time we have remaining this week and see what happens if we get something done in September.
Okay.
I did mention to the chair that if we were to change the agreement on this capital piece, to change the financing for the school project, both town meetings are gonna need to take the vote on doing that. So it is a bit of a process for sure, but the agreement that we have right now is what we have, so.
The money would not have to go into budget until probably 2022.
It'd be a small payment, probably, maybe potentially for 21.
Right.
Yeah, to get the project kicked off.
So there's time to address it.
That's not what I was understood. The
No,
way I understood is when you bond that, when you go into it,
That's subject to our agreement. That's subject to our agreement between the two towns, so we can agree to anything in terms of timing.
I'd like to make sure about that.
Yeah, so essentially what'll happen is, because they're following this process that Cape Tech did, they send us the bill. It's up to us then to decide how we want to pay for that. Either we send it to the voters for debt exclusion, or we decide to eat it ourselves. And you have a continuous opportunity to try to finance it, but the percentage share that we're gonna get as a bill, that'll have to go to town meeting to get a change in the agreement.
Right.
So, it's because it's cumbersome, though it sounds like it's far away, we've got time, it'll be here before we all know it, if we get that win vote in December on the school project, so. But that would be the process to change the agreement today.
So I guess that begs the question, then how does that affect, if that was the case, how would that affect the debt on the high school project?
What high school project?
The renovation that was
Remaining
done.
debt?
Yeah.
The remaining debt? I don't think it would.
Well, then, I don't understand.
Because the wording, if you look at the agreement has multiple paragraphs with regard to sharing of capital costs. And I think the multiple paragraphs would continue. There would be a paragraph having to do with renovations occurring prior to such and such a date for the high school. And then any new construction after such and such a date for a shared middle school.
Yeah. Agreed.
Right.
Okay. So I think it could be dealt with that way. It's not easy. Yeah.
No, I think that they were under the impression that, I think from what Jenny was saying, that's it, this is the agreement, that's how it's gonna be funded, and I guess.
Sure, she lives in Dennis. I'd say that too if I were her.
But, so basically, you're saying that we could fund it one way, and then it can be amended in the agreement to fund it after the fact?
Well, it's the percentage
So it
share.
doesn't have to be done before the
No.
project is voted
No,
on?
because we do have an agreement. It's what share are we gonna carry? How we fund it is our own business, right? Our share.
Well,
Our share.
you're talking about the debt itself, I'm talking about the percentage of the overall project. I'm not talking about like a specific number that the Yarmouth, I'm talking about the percentage. Once that project is approved, we're not locked in that percentage, is what you're saying? It can be amended by the agreement?
Yeah, so the agreement is, right now as it's structured, is based on student enrollment.
Right, okay.
So if we do something different than that, we have to just get it through two town meetings. Yeah.
Well, so if you draft
Yeah.
that letter,
Yep.
and then I could sign it, or
Sure.
Mike could sign it in my absence,
Yep.
one way or the other.
We'll take care of that.
Okay.
I'll sign it in French.
Just make sure we read the wording very, very particularly
it's gotta be-
to make sure it's not interpreted.
Yeah, it might be helpful to circulate it to the board so that everybody sees it. It's just such a.
I don't know if we can do
Try to get it
that.
out this week.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh, you
I'd
mean
prefer
you're
because of the
concerned
open meeting
about,
law. That's
yeah,
correct. You
yeah,
can't do that.
okay,
yeah.
all right.
You can do that as long as we only reply to you.
Yeah.
I think that there was a recent deliberation in
Oh,
the
really?
town board that indicated something a little different than that. but
okay.
I'd rather stay clear of that.
All right, we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, phone calls work, I guess.
The only other point I'd like to make is, and as Norm pointed out to the members of the Dennis contingent, we're not looking for, on capital, them to make a dramatic move, because they're at, we're looking for like 7 points, 7 percentage points, more or less. And would help us a lot, but it wouldn't certainly cripple them by any means.
So. All right. Anything else? Have we had a motion on the consent agenda?
Yep,
Did we
that's
do
done.
that?
Yep,
All right,
we
we
did
did
that.
that.
Yep.
All right. Anything else then, Dan?
No.
Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Good
All
job.
those in
Norm.
favor? Say
Aye.
aye.